Hey guys, anime fanfics here. This is chapters 49 to 52 of Obito's redemption story by Yaboy Assassin on Wattpad. Links to all stories are in the description below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Chapter 49. As Obito continued with his attack on Urashiki, the Leaf Genin continued their own hard-fought battles. Naruto's leaving? Hinata thought from behind a tree, her Byakugan able to pick out the orange-clad ninja chasing after another who had far exceeded her range long ago. She willed her body to stand, fear still striking through her. I have to help. Her body jilted in surprise and her head swiveled to where she heard Shino crying out in pain as Sakan toyed with him. Oh, calm down. Sakan chuckled, applying more force to his feet as it crushed the Aburame's head onto the ground. Make this more fun. She could no longer bear his screams and began to cover her ears, but it didn't work. Though muffled, she could hear it as clear as day and her body began to tremble at the noise. She knew if she helped she would be met with a similar fate. The fact scared her into keeping still, but the want to help her teammate was still in the back of her mind. Fong over Fong. Two whirlwinds of fast-moving creatures blurred into sight overhead, giving the sound ninja time to only look up before they smashed into the ground. The ground picked up and debris from the ground jumped into the air as the sound ninja jumped away. Seconds after they landed, the smoke cleared and Kiba and Akamaru stood side by side, both letting out gnarly growls through clenched teeth. Standing in front of the almost unconscious Aburame, Sakan smirked. It seemed another opponent came to die. Keep your hands off Shino. He growled out, facial features turning feral. Jirobo, let me handle this. Sakan eyes widened, his bloodlust flowing. I want to hear his screams of pain. Don't worry, I'll finish off the other brat. Jirobo said with his own smirk. They took a glance at each other before they moved almost at the same time. Sakan dashed forward and Kiba barely reacted in time. He was able to put his hands before him before he was launched across the field as Sakan had slammed his body into him. He grunted harshly as he skidded along the ground but gained his footing almost like second nature. The Inuzuka was flexible and lifted his feet high enough to kick the sound ninja in the stomach hard enough to where he was sent into the air. Kiba's body was relieved at the lack of weight on top of him and he flipped to his feet before leaping in the air after the other ninja. As they fought, Jirobo was high in the air and was about to smash down on the almost unconscious Shino when a hand had lashed out in front of him. Jirobo could not even dodge before he was sent flying back meters from a heavy punch to the face. He crashed harshly into the ground and when he got up he bristled. Choji stood before Shino with a determined glare. You fat ass. Jirobo bellowed, face turning an angry shade of red. I'll kill you. He rushed forward and their fight begun. Triple X. As her squad members and such fought the sound 4, Tenten had just landed beside Ino and began trying to dress her wounds the best she could. Luckily, the girl was alive, if only barely. Being hit by Urashiki's fishing rod, she had sustained a deep slash across her abdomen that had turned a bit green in areas. It would have very well turned into a live-ending infection had Tenten had not come down. She continued to dress the wounds, unaware of a presence stalking her from behind. Slowly, an injured man emerged from the shadow and limped to her from behind. The silent footsteps keeping her unaware of the shinobi behind her. A maniacal grin spread across the gray-haired man's cheeks, eyes wild. He raised his arm, a kunai in hand, and was about to slice her throat when another man had crashed into him. The sudden noise started Tenten, but her trained instincts flipped on like a switch and she turned with her own kunai in hand to see a line of dust obscuring her vision of the scene before her. Within that dust, Yamato was fiercely holding down the deranged sound ninja. They both grunted, each trying to push their weight onto the other to accomplish their goals. For Yamato was to keep the man down and for Kabuto was to get the other man off his. Their chakras flared under the weight of the intense struggle and the ground began to crack. Eventually, Yamato started to gain the upper hand, the cells in his body keeping his stamina from tiring him out as Kabuto's own began to affect his strength. His muscles were beginning to tire and Yamato was able to force them to the ground, breaking even more parts of it when he smashed it down. Why are you protecting those brats? Kabuto asked, still straining, wanting to gain control somehow. You tried to attack your own friend earlier, right? You know nothing. An anger began bubbling inside the wood user and his strength raised to new, even greater heights. With this massive increase in power, he was able to smash the sound ninja into the ground and keep him there to where he was unable to move. Heh, fool. Kabuto smirked and before Yamato could react, turned into mud and began dissolving before his eyes. Yamato could barely mutter a curse when a sharp, chakra-based weapon cut through his abdomen. The mud had caused his to get stuck and he was basically a free target. Kabuto took the chance immediately. To any other ninja, this would have been debilitating, possibly life-ending, but Yamato was no ordinary ninja. He swiftly turned behind him, breaking away from the mud and slammed his elbow into Kabuto's jaw. His shock hadn't allowed him to move in time. He was sent stumbling away, holding his bleeding face and not realizing that the first attack was only the beginning. His eyes couldn't even close as Yamato moved in blurs. He smashed a fist into his stomach and Kabuto lunged over, enabling the wood user to strike with a knee strike that sent his head jerking up. Another strike by Yamato sent the other man flying to the ground in a bloodied, face pooling blood and hands no longer in front of him to block. Yamato panted slightly and looked at his wound. The stab wound was slowly healing and it wouldn't be a couple of more seconds until it was completely healed. He looked over at Kabuto, realizing that their fight was over. He held up a seal, intent on finishing the fight when Tenten interrupted him. Hey, what's going on? Who are you? Tenten yelled, leaping onto the scene in a crouch. She had left Ino behind after she finished dressing her wounds, wanting to make sure that the other kunoichi was safe. Just get back, little girl. He completed another seal and wood pillars fought their way from the ground and wrapped around the bleeding sound ninja who had uttered a pained groan, but nothing more. Tenten eyes had widened upon seeing the jutsu. That's Dash earlier, their team that had split off from before the boys had fought the Sound 4 had seen and talked about a jutsu that used wood. And that guy was right in front of her. She leaped high into the air and a scroll unraveled around her. A puff of smoke erupted and dozens of weapons began to rain down on the man. She was assuming that he was also one of the ones that had attacked Sasuke. The root member only turned and looked at the weapons raining at him with annoyance. He ducked, weaved, and leaped away from each weapon that was aimed at him. They struck the ground all around him, but he paid them no mind, looking at the girl still in the air instead. She held up a seal and smirked. All the weapons began to light up, startling Tenzo to look around frantically to barely see the explosive tag before they all had detonated at once. A large explosion filled the sky and superheated it. Suffocating smoke filled the area soon after and Tenten held in her breath as she fell into inside of it, gravity taking control over her. She landed safely on the ground and leaped back until she was out of the smoke cloud, letting the fresh air hit her lungs. She panted, slightly because of the chakra exhaustion and her earlier fight with Kadamaru. She wasn't there for a moment longer when a figure materialized behind her in a blur. Somehow, she had seen it only barely and quickly reached for her pouch, only to stop when a kunai stopped mere inches away from her throat. You're a skilled ninja for your age. She felt his warm breath in the back of her neck and nearly tensed, the weapon before her the only thing keeping her in place. You could have killed me right just now. What's holding you back? She felt inclined to ask, gulping slowly. You're not a threat to Konoha, so there's no need. This, he motioned to his weapon, is merely to keep you in line so we could chat. I mean you no harm. Wait. You said I pose no threat to the hidden leaf. Does that mean you're a comrade? He nodded, finally the girl understood. Yes, it does. I am a member of the Umbu. He moved his weapon away from her and took a step back. Tenten immediately moved back a bit to gain some distance and turned to face him. When he reached in his own pouch and pulled out a Konoha headband, she breathed in a sigh of relief. She bowed her head. I'm sorry for attacking you. That's fine. He waved off the apology and turned to the smoke that was beginning to lift. He could sense Kabuto. The man had most likely gotten away due to the explosion from the tags. And just when he was captured too. Damn. He got away because of me, didn't he? The girl asked, already knowing the answer. It's fine. He could have gotten far. I'll find him again. Before she could offer to help, he was gone in a blur. Something about him just doesn't feel right. I don't know how to explain it. She muttered to herself, looking in the direction the man had blurred away in. Triple X. Crushing pain that destroyed bones and squeezed organs had Yurashiki groaning in pain. He barely kept them in with clenched teeth as he looked at the Susanoo evil eyes with fear. He couldn't move a single inch, the hand crushing him. Obito stared, his eyes a window into his burning anger as his Rinnegan glowered fiercely. The low-hanging smoke began to clear and revealed the fully armored Susanoo. I'd like to know that right now. He gritted out, putting more pressure on the fist that had grabbed Yurashiki. The force was too great for his internal organs to bear, and blood shot out of his mouth, running down his clothing and in between the finger dogged the Susanoo. I feel weaker. The godlike being thought before his eyes widened. He's absorbing my chakra with that damn Rinnegan. When I mentioned Kaguya, you said you would not tell me anything about her. That tells me you know her, and I want to know everything you know about her. Now. Keeping painful groans in through clenched teeth, the Otsutsuki tried to figure a way out of his predicament. No options were coming to him, his chakra being drained fast. He had to come up with something. This guy, Obito, realized that no matter how much pain he was put through, he would not spill secrets of his clan. That type of dedication wasn't seen often, and while Obito respected it to some degree, it was more annoying than anything else right now. Perhaps Genjutsu would work. Now that he thought about it, he hasn't really seen Genjutsu been used on the likes of Kaguya and wondered the effects it would have. He supposed this would be the perfect time to test that. Obito commanded his Susanoo to bring the Otsutsuki to where he would be eye level with the Uchiha. Not knowing what Obito was planning, Yurashiki made the mistake of looking the Uchiha in the eye. Instantly, Obito locked his eyes with Yurashiki and his eyes widened as chakra flooded inside. Genjutsu. He had cast the jutsu with his Rinnegan instead of his Sharingan, not knowing if it would be strong enough to capture the Otsutsuki, and didn't want to take the risk in case he had defense against it. For a second, it had worked and Obito was close to reaching the memories he sought for. Then, it failed. It wasn't overpowered or anything, it simply had stopped working. A brief but strong gust of wind broke through the air and Obito felt a strong shake that rocked even his Susanoo. His eyes snapped open and he saw that the hand on his Susanoo that had been holding Yurashiki was completely destroyed. He heard a maniacal laugh of glee and his gaze shot upward only to widen in surprise. Yurashiki was no longer the same he had originally been. He now had bird-like features and his chakra was off the charts that had the air around him boiling. What caused this? He wondered. His stance remained steady and he was not worried in the least about squaring off against the Otsutsuki. A grin stretched on his marked face, Yurashiki rushed forward. Die. Despite the sudden increase in speed, Obito was more than adept to keeping up with it. He banished his Susanoo and surprised the Yurashiki when he let the Otsutsuki pass through him. They turned back at each other at the same time, but Obito had just completed multiple seals that Yurashiki hadn't even seen. Fire Style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Obito had released several dozen small fireballs that didn't even faze Yurashiki. He soared through the air rapidly, swiveling through each of the fireballs with little trouble before he had reached Obito. He barely put his hands up to block before he was sent spiraling to the ground with a ground-shattering kick. Debris flew high into the air upon the impact, but Obito was quick to get up, leaping out of the smoke. When he was still, his head swiveled when he sensed Yurashiki rushing from above. He leaped back and Yurashiki crashed into the ground. Dust flew everywhere, clouding a mile of the land around them. Suddenly, Yurashiki popped out of the crater he made and drew down his fist. Obito's left arm rushed out to grab it and his right hand had grabbed a kunai and slashed across the wrist of Yurashiki. Obito was aiming to cut it off. The kunai shattered instantly upon touching Yurashiki's skin, but Obito hadn't even reacted to it as he swirled his body around to release a roundhouse. Yurashiki had ducked and his fist had rushed. Obito had blocked once more but was sent into the air by the force of the punch. Still, he wasn't fazed in the least and gained control of himself in the air. He had slapped his palms together and chakra built up inside of him. Wood style, smothering pillars. Beneath him, a multitude of pillars launched out of the ground and shot at Urashiki in multiple directions at once. He seemed unfazed and zigzagged through the air, dodging every single pillar. They were unrelenting and even when dodged still chased the Otsutsuki. While he dealt with that, Obito let gravity take control and began to fall down back to the ground. The Uchiha couldn't help the grimace on his face. Something was wrong. How had he suddenly gained so much strength? He was missing something. An action, something happened that gave the Otsutsuki this massive power-up. Can Kagaya do something like this? The thought was worrying. She was already a monster in strength, but if she could get even stronger then there was no telling how powerful she could become. And he was already unsure that he could defeat her even now. Enough! Urashiki hollered. He twisted in the air and began to assault the long, sharp vines chasing him. He cut through them with ease and left little but ash in his wake before he raced right back onto Obito. Obito looked back at the Otsutsuki with a bit of a glare. The guy was persistent and it was getting rather annoying. Obito was about to touch down onto the ground before disappearing in a blur. Urashiki froze midair, eyes widened and full of surprise when Obito was suddenly in front of him, a hand lifted in front of his face. I'm getting real sick of you. Between them, an invisible force manifested faster than Urashiki could comprehend. Almighty push. The force lashed out and Urashiki was hit square in the face with enough force that his face seemed to actually cave in for a slight second. He crashed into the ground with a heavy boom, but the assault wasn't over as large fireballs slammed into him right after. It was like a fireworks show as sparks began to rain down between the dense smoke that had rose high into the air. Obito had let out another breath and released a large amount of chakra into his eyes. Mid-fall his Susanoo manifested, clearing the smoke with its giant hand swinging across the air that had created a large wind. Once again, his perfect Susanoo had come to life. The majestic armor rose high into the air and Urashiki couldn't help to look at it with a large hint of fear on his face. Despite his power-up, even he could see he had no advantage against the Jounin. That thought infuriated him. If I can't get any information out of you then you are useless to me. Slowly, Obito brought his fingers into a seal. His Susanoo mimicked his movements and the air itself began to feel heavy all of a sudden, like a pressure was literally forcing it down. It was Obito's powerful chakra that was doing this. You're nothing like Kagaya. You're weak and a fool. Trees all around shook violently and the earth beneath them shook violently just from the pressure of his chakra. This is over. Triple X. Naruto was a stamina freak. He was rarely ever tired and when he was it was never for long. It was the reason why he was able to not only keep up with Kimimaro enough to where he could see him but also have plenty of energy to fight when they stopped in a large, grassy field. Naruto wondered why he stopped but kept moving forward until he was right in front of his opponent. He held in his fear as the man turned to him. Naruto couldn't see what he was thinking by his plain face, which made it even more difficult to approach. Hey, Sasuke, give him back. He said, his fear going away for his determination in saving his comrade. Sasuke is the prize Lord Orochimaru is after. The white-haired teen finally said with an indifferent tone, just like his face. Don't talk about him like he's some kind of thing. Naruto yelled out, his anger overtaking any fear that could have been felt from this guy. They would not talk about his teammate, his friend, as if he were some kind of toy or something. The teen's face hasn't changed in the slightest and it only made Naruto more angry. If you follow after me anymore, I will kill you. Impulsively, Naruto ran forward with a yell akin to a war cry but blinked in surprise when the other had raced forward to meet him. He was in front of the Uzumaki in the blink of an eye and Naruto was caught off guard completely by the speed. A fist slammed into his face and sent him flying back across the grassy plain. A wind began to blow the soft grass and Naruto began getting to his feet slowly, the stinging pain in his cheeks keeping him from getting up as quickly as he would. Go home. You have no chance in defeating me. No chance! Naruto yelled out, gaining the others' attention. He stood up on his feet with a hardened glare, and the other shinobi internally praised his resilience. It would prove futile though. Hi-ya! Yelling again, Naruto raced forward. This time he would be prepared. He held the special sign to summon Shodown clones just as the Sound Ninja raced forward again. He's fast, Naruto thought when the Sound Ninja blitzed him. He was prepared this time, and a Shodown clone popped into existence right between the two. It had taken the hit while Naruto leaped into the air. Chakra swirled in his hand and formed the Rasengan as he began to descend. The smoke obscured the Sound Ninja's vision for enough time to where Naruto was able to get close. Rasengan! The attack slammed into his back, sending dust high into the air at the powerful technique. W what? Naruto asked in surprise. The Sound Ninja didn't show any emotion as he was barely saved by bones coming out of his skin and protecting him from the ninjutsu. Naruto felt a deep pain in his arm, and when the smoke cleared saw that one of the bones' hand impaled his forearm. Teeth clenched in pain, blood dropped down his arm before he pushed away, gaining some distance. He panted and held his bleeding arm, blood dripping on the grass. Creepily, his head snapped up at Naruto and his entire body seemed to click until it was completely turned. Naruto was shocked when he swiveled his arm sideways and a hail of tiny bones rushed at him. He could only create 2 shadow clones to take the hit for him just in time to save himself. Die! The voice came from behind Naruto. Naruto jumped away but was still cut on the cheek by a sword, made of bones? Ugh, he grunted in pain, landing on his feet. Again, he heard movement behind him, but this time he created a shadow clone. It had appeared behind him and deflected a blow that would have sliced Naruto's head off. Naruto leaped away again, and this time he was not followed. Damn it! This guy is fast! Naruto cursed. He looked at the bones, wondering where they had come from and how he was using them as weapons. No! I won't give up. His hands stretched into his signature seal. Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu. With that single technique, he spawned more than 100 clones at once and surrounded the Sound Ninja. With the numbers to his advantage, he felt his confidence come back. Give Sasuke back or get your head beat in. All around him, his clones had sent a strong gaze at the Sound Ninja, who hadn't even reacted to being outnumbered so heavily. Kimimaro raised his arm slowly until it was right in front of him. Slowly, to Naruto's disgust and surprise, for bones began to cut through his skin until they were sticking out like sore thumbs. If you want him back, then you'll have to force me. It was a wish Naruto would happily oblige. All at once, dozens of his shadow clones began to rush the teen. His limbs flicked out in several directions and struck down every single clone that had gotten close to him. He twisted, flipped, dodged, and jumped over the young ninja as he sliced through the clones like a hit butter through a knife. It was akin to a massacre. A clone had jumped at him from the side, but he had merely kicked it away before 5 more came into place. He bent down until his face was looking completely down before something under his skin began to move. The clones hadn't seen it until it was too late. All at once, dozens of his shadow clones began to. Multiple, sharp bones pushed out from his back and impaled about a dozen clones, dispelling them. This guy, he's using his own bones to fight. Naruto realized nervously, sweat running down his face. It would be hard to get past his defense like that if the bones came out that fast, but it wouldn't truly be impossible. That was all the Uzumaki needed. He formed a seal and closed his eyes. His clones that hadn't attacked followed his actions. Slowly, he began drawing from that chakra. Feeling the change in the atmosphere, Kimimaro raised his head, the bones coming from his back beginning to slowly withdraw back into his body. What's he doing now? Can't he see it's pointless? Suddenly, a sudden wind blew through the area and all of the Narutos let out yells as red chakra began forming around them all at once. Kimimaro looked back and forth between the clones as his hair swayed around from the unnatural winds that the boy was producing. The Kekkai Genkai user figured out quickly that the boy was drawing power, although he didn't know where it was coming from. Dozens of Narutos fell on all fours, growling and grinning with feral features as the red chakra began to settle around each of the clones. All around the red chakra cloaks were shaped like the fox spirit deep inside with a single tail. Kimimaro glanced all around him. The change in the air alone told him that this was no ordinary power-up. This was something serious. All at once, the clones let out roars when they raised their heads, the force enough to shake the area all around them. Kimimaro kept himself rooted with chakra as he was rushed from every single angle. Deep in the vegetation of the trees on the edge of the open clearing, a figure smirked, bloodlust tipping over the edge as he watched the Jinchuriki of the Ninetales become riled up. Magnificent. Triple X. Pupils dilated in fear, body shaking, no drowning in that fear. Karen was scared beyond belief. Amazing battle happening all around her was something that was common, but the levels that were being thrown around were crazy. She just couldn't believe it, especially from two battles. There was a battle far away that she could sense with such clarity that it actually scared her. The two had chakra levels unheard of, and she was sure that it had to be some type of gods fighting each other. There was simply nothing else that could explain it. The other battle. She knew one of the participants was Kimimaro. She knew his chakra from how frequently she cared for him under orders. But the other felt oddly familiar, like she should know about it. It gave her a slight comfort in a way she couldn't describe. It all faded when it disappeared, and she was left feeling the hatred oozing in the air from just how demonic the chakra felt. She couldn't describe it any better than that, and honestly she didn't want to. She wished she didn't have her sensing abilities because she couldn't bear to handle all of what she could sense all at once. Unconsciously, almost like a survival instinct, she began to back away slowly. She had to get away from this. It was all too crazy. She gulped and almost broke into a jog when a voice stopped her dead in her tracks. "Where do you think you're going?" She didn't know what was making her move, but she turned around slowly, the fear very evident on her pale face. What she saw wasn't what she was expecting. She saw a blonde girl that looked close to her age. She had 4 pigtails and brandished a confident smirk on her face as she stood on the branch of a slightly bent-over tree. Who is that, girl? Her eyes finally picked up the handband the girl wore on around her neck. A sand shinobi? What's with the scared look? Aren't you a part of the team that captured Sasuke Uchiha? The way she spoke showed that she was not only confident in demeanor but in attitude as well. Karen gulped, quickly throwing her arm to cover the sound symbol on the headband she was wearing. The motion only caused the other girl to smirk. Karen's throat ran dry when the other girl's bloodlust had reached her. Suddenly, she broke out in a panicked run, arms flailing around while she screamed, desperate to get away. "Humph," Temari grunted, quickly grabbing and opening the fan on her back. "Say goodbye," she yelled, pouring a ton of chakra as she gave her fan a mighty swing. A sharp wind sliced through the air and anything in its path to kill the redhead, and it would have had something not got it its way. What, but why? Temari muttered, her head swirling to the person that landed a few meters away from her, arms crossed and face complacent. He didn't speak until another person landed on his own tree. Down below, the redhead was almost at the point of hyperventilation as she sat on the ground, body completely numbed to fear and breath getting increasingly heavier. Sand? Before her, a strong wall of sand stood before her and no doubt certain death. She wondered where it had come from, but thanked goodness she was okay. Her eyes wondered when she could sense 2 more individuals beyond the thick barrier of grinded earth. Temari, the cold voice came out deep and his naturally haunting eyes landed on hers. "We won't kill any innocents." She was obviously scared and wanted to get away. Kankuro had elected to say nothing. This change in Gaara was something that he didn't anticipate and wondered what was on his little brother's mind. Despite that, it was a change he could appreciate. A vision of Naruto popped into his head and he couldn't help but smile. He didn't know how the hell the kid worked his magic. Temari gulped. Those eyes still held the cold and ruthless demeanor that was associated with her little brother, but she knew he was striving to change himself. It was why she spoke up. "But Gaara, she is an enemy and we were given an order to eliminate them," she argued. Gaara turned his head forward and closed his eyes briefly to calm himself from killing his older sister. He hoped the feeling would go away with time. The sand wall below them crumbled to the ground and he opened his eyes and couldn't help himself when they locked onto the redhead girl's red ones as the sand retreated back into his gourd. Even when the process was complete, their eyes were still locked on each other. What's going on? Temari wondered, watching the exchange in confusion. Her brother seemed to be similarly confused and they shared a look at one another. Was this love at first sight? Suddenly, Gaara broke the eye contact by looking away and it seemed to shake the girl from her own stare as a heavy blush rose on her face before she looked down to the ground. Gaara's face contorted in confusion. What was that? We should go, Gaara. Kankuro broke him out of his thoughts. Those leaf ninjas need our help. Gaara nodded. You're right, Kankuro. Let's go. Together, they disappeared in blurs, leaving the blushing sound ninja alone. That cute boy who saved me, his chakra is kinda scary. Triple X. Oi, Kakashi. What's going on through your head? Kakashi turned his head slightly to the other occupant that had followed him to his flat. He had been stocking up his supplies as his other members got ready themselves. They were heading out in about 10 minutes. Nothing but the mission, Guy. I know that's not true. Guy stated immediately, stepping forward a bit. I want to know the truth, as your rival and friend Kakashi. Kakashi sighed, turning back to his desk and started packing once more, briefly going silent. Guy waited patiently, which some would paint as out of character, but he knew Kakashi better than most did and knew the silent ninja would talk, eventually. I don't know whether to believe that letter or not. Don't you mean you don't want to believe it? Guy corrected. Kakashi gripped the kunai in his hand tightly, stopping himself from reacting haphazardly. He was a jounin and needed to act as such. He couldn't injure a comrade right before a mission. Tenzo is someone I believe to be very open, well as open as a shinobi can be. In their profession, skepticism and paranoia were the norm. In fact, it was encouraged and taught. I don't think someone like him could actually betray the leaf. The man had been so mild-tempered and nice that the thought would never come into the mind of even the most paranoid shinobi. Kakashi wasn't the most careful shinobi, but he did consider himself above average, even for jounin. So for a spy to be under his nose the entire time was eye-opening to say the least. Do you not think Rin could be wrong about what she is saying? Guy asked pointedly. He didn't know the shinobi as well as Kakashi did, but knew what could happen to Kakashi's mental should it be true. She might not have a reason to lie or anything, but it could be some sort of mistake. And the letter could be forged. I doubt that. Kakashi thought, putting the kunai into his pouch and closing it up. He knew it was Rin's handwriting as she always wrote to him on birthdays or holidays. It was a frequent occurrence and he knew her handwriting like the back of his own hand. Even without that, there was no clear motivation to give out the information that Tenzo was a traitor and there nor any reason Rin could have made some sort of error. She was simply too smart for such a thing. Regardless, we have our mission. Kakashi retorted. If Tenzo's a threat to the hidden leaf, I will kill him without hesitation. Kakashi grabbed his pouch and turned to Guy, strapping the small object to himself. Regardless of what he said, he truly wanted Guy to be right. That it was a mistake from Rin. That the letter was forged some way. That Rin could even have been manipulated. But he knew, deep down, that any of these so-called possibilities weren't possible. A knock at the door Sunday through the room and Guy opened the door and stepped back to let the guest in. You guys ready? Kakashi asked. At the door, Anko smirked. You bet we are. Behind her, Izumi was dressed in a different outfit. It was a bit lighter than her last one but covered her up a bit more. She had a small vest-like sash around her chest with a long top almost reaching her thighs. Her knees and a bit of her thigh was exposed, though partly covered by a fishnet, and she wore long combat boots, reinforced by light, metal plating. Let's go. Chapter 50. Their Foz Dash. Kimimaro hadn't heard he time to finish his thoughts as he narrowly avoided being smashed into the ground by an incoming clone fueled by the Ninetales. He had leaped into the air to gain distance, looking down upon the dozen or so clones. Amazing! He complimented. So this is the power of the Ninetales Jinchuriki. He landed on the ground in a crouch and his very own curse seal began to unleash, black marks began to cover his body and his chakra multiplied. Give Sasuke back! A Naruto bellowed, dashing forward, fast enough to create a trail of dust. He had reached Kimimaro quickly and lashed out with a claw, but Kimimaro, at the same, lifted his foot and used even more speed to launch the Jinchuriki back. His eyes widened when a red chakra hand shot out of the crowd at him. He leaned back almost until his head was touching, showing his athleticism and evading being crushed. His eyes widened when he saw that it was just chakra and a sharp bone shot out of his arm. He kept his right foot planted before bouncing off it and slicing through the chakra, landing on his feet in the process. So he could cut through it. Good. However, he had no time to celebrate it as many more of the same hands shot at him all at once. He twisted and turned his body, leaping from one place to the other before running across the grassland, avoiding every single hand that aimed to crush him. It failed, however. Suddenly he was airborne as a massive hand come from underneath the ground he had been standing. This was the first time his face had shown surprise, but it didn't last long as he followed the arm that had grabbed him down to its owner. The clone let out a roar and pulled back his massive arm. Kimimaro shot through the air and was going to be pulled through the ground by the arm, which it had come out of, but a bone had shot out of Kimimaro's uncovered fingertips. They were too fast and small for the Jinchuriki to react to, and multiple of the fast-moving projectiles had went through its body. Poof! It had been a clone, but despite his efforts he was still pulled into the ground. Multiple Narutos above ground growled in anger, about to follow the bone user before an explosion caught their attention. Purple smoke rose high into the air and a hint of sinister chakra illuminated the landscape. Slowly, it began to clear, a sinister chuckle emerging from the smoke well before the one causing the noise. Despite his state, Naruto was completely calm, the appearance of his teammate shocking him still. Sasuke rose, his head high, dark blue, almost purple-looking spiky hair falling over his shoulder and down his back. His darkened skin complemented his black eyes and he had a big star-shaped black marker covering his nose. This was his curse mark at level 2. Sasuke! Naruto muttered, still shocked by the feel of his teammate's chakra and his new look. Sasuke turned to his teammate in painfully slow movements and gave him a smirk that would have sent shivers down his spine. The air between the two seemed to thicken out of nowhere and it seemed Sasuke was about to attack. Naruto was even more shocked when his teammate simply ran off away in the distance, the ground breaking underneath the pressure. Sasuke! Naruto yelled out before trying to give chase. Sasuke! Die! Suddenly, before any of the Narutos could react, long sharp bones penetrated each and every Naruto. The clones popped out of existence almost at the same time, leaving a Naruto covered in a tail of the Ninetales chakra and bleeding heavily from his pierced abdomen. Unbelievable amounts of pain shot through him, and he felt himself almost paralyzed from it. He watched his blood leak of the long bone and grimaced hard when he felt someone close in on him. Look up! The voice commanded, and he was quick to look. Kimimaro stood atop one of his bones in stage 2 of his curse mark. He looks like Sasuke. The Jinchuriki realized, instantly noting their similarities in appearance. It's time to finish this. Kimimaro stared. He lifted his hand and bones began to come out and twist around it. The bone was large and heavy and Naruto could feel the power within it just by looking at it. If he was hit by that, he couldn't even blink before the large drill-like attack was coming at him. Suddenly, as fast as a speeding train, the attack stopped. Kimimaro began to breathe heavily and sweat poured down his body profusely. His body was running out of fumes and beginning to fail him, despite his will to help his master. What's going on? My body. Naruto wasted no time to counterattack. He lashed out violently, a chakra hand forming mid-attack and flinging the bone user away as if he were a fly. He smashed into the ground with a heavy thud and Naruto began to release the bone that had impaled him, the wound healing almost immediately. The smoke cleared around Kimimaro to show that he was no longer in his curse mark level 2 form, only able to sustain half of level 1. He was still breathing heavily on the ground, body aching even more from his latest impact with the ground. Seeing this, Naruto only thought of one thing. His head swiveled in the direction Sasuke had ran off in earlier. I can catch up with Sasuke. That guy is hurt for some reason. He was going to turn around fully and speed away but stopped when he noticed something fast approaching him out of the corner of his eyes. He leaped back and a blur smashed into the ground before him, kicking up dust that momentarily gave Naruto a slight disadvantage in sight. It would prove to be no good. Several kunai came flying out of through the smoke and would have impaled him in the head had he not ducked. He lashed out with an arm and his chakra stretched out into a hand and made to grab the target from a distance but missed. He had jumped into the air and Naruto finally saw who it was. It's that guy? Who's with Orochimaru? Naruto wasn't that good with faces but the hair and glasses gave it away instantly. Sorry, Naruto-kun. He feigned amusement as he shrugged his shoulders. But I can't let you interfere with Lord Orochimaru. Sasuke is his now. Sasuke, the demon chakra flared around him and he flashed his canine-like teeth. Is not a thing. He rushed forward with speeds that were able to almost stun Kabuto. He lashed out with a right that Kabuto ducked over but wasn't able to counter the foot that slammed into his face and sent him back about 10 meters. He tumbled along the ground in a painful heap as Naruto leaped high into the air. Kabuto had stopped moving just in time for Naruto to crash 2 of his feet into his midsection, sending a resounding boom throughout the field and large scatter of earth in the air. Naruto skidded out of the smoke on all fours before racing off in the direction Sasuke had run off to, unaware that someone else had landed behind him where he left Kabuto. The only thing that was on his mind was his friend and when he was going to make it. Triple X. Neji was utterly exhausted. His fight with Kadamaru was intense, he had barely won. The Sound 4 member was the strongest person he had ever faced and it held true if one were to go by the injuries littering his body. He was barely breathing at this point, not able to stand on his feet and feeling blood leaking from his body. He wondered if he would die. As his eyes began to slowly close, he could only think about his father, Hinata, and Naruto. Despite the pain, his body couldn't help to smile and thought of the Jinchuriki. Thanks for everything you've done, Naruto. I only wish we could have had our last fight. Our true battle. His body stilled when his eyes closed and he lost consciousness. He gasped suddenly as if finally gaining breath after holding it for a long period of time. He had already shot up, breathing heavily as he looked around him. When he saw the black area all around him with no visible light, confusion was all he felt. Where was he? His eyes lost its light and began to grow more morbid. Was he dead? Was he actually dead? No, my ancestor. A voice spoke with respect and clarity that he could actually mistake for another Hyuga. Who's there? Neji called out, head swiveling around in a desperate attempt to find who had been just talking. He had turned his head for a total of 5 times before the corner of his eyes caught something materializing in a bright white light midair. Now he was even more confused when he tried to understand who exactly was in front of him. The man was the palest person he had ever seen with equally long gray hair falling down far below his shoulders and 2 horns protruding from his forehead, going past his hair. He looked old, like in his late 60s maybe early 70s. Neji gulped, the man had a slightly intimidating aura. Who are you? Where am I? The man held both of his hands out before him and Neji just noticed that the man was floating with his legs crossed. You are at the border between life and death. When he saw the panic in Neji's eyes he continued. But you did not die. I brought you here. How? You haven't answered any of my questions. You are right, I apologize for my rudeness. The man closed his eyes just before a number of torches began to light up around them. Neji looked as each one lit up and counted 10, all lit around them in a big circle. The old man opened his eyes once more. My name is Hamura Otsutsuki and I am able to bring you here for a number of reasons. Niji kept quiet, nervousness beginning to seep into his form, though he was able to hide it with a blank face. He didn't know what to think of the old man. In fact, he was quite unsure about anything that had happened since he passed out. Though he did find the fact that he was not dead a relief. The floating man before him lowered one of his hands and brought out the other before Niji. The Hyuga scrutinized the open palm out of reflex, seeing the wear and tear of age. Whoever this man was, he had definitely been through his own fair share of fighting. If you want the answers that you seek, explaining to you would be tiresome for the both of us. Niji agreed. It seemed like it would be a longer story no matter how you sliced it. But if you were to touch my palm with your own, all the information you seek will be given to you in an instant. As well as extra. The last part was said low enough for the Hyuga to not hear. Niji nodded and walked forward a bit, keeping his pace steady and body at the ready to defend himself in case he would be attacked. He didn't trust the man. He would have to gain it. Slowly, Niji's palm connected to the older man's and his eyes widened suddenly when a flood of memories shot through his body. He had learned so much. From the man's origins, before him, to his goal as in being here at this very moment. It was nauseating and he felt like he was going to faint. His body felt seized and he froze up. He could feel his body changing and a foreign feeling flooding it from his hand. He broke the contact and fell to the ground, staring frighteningly at the hand as he could feel a type of feeling entering his eyes. He gritted his teeth, almost unbearable pain reaching his eyes and making him want to claw them out as he closed his eyelids and griped his face into his hands. The pain rose with every second to the point where he actually began to scream out in pain. He hadn't felt worse pain before, as it literally felt like a fire was set off inside his eyelids. Hamura watched his ancestor writhe in pain with barely the tiniest hint of emotion. The pain was necessary. This was his warrior. He knew his brother had chosen Obito to change the fate of the world, and he, at a time, thought that the Uchiha was actually capable of fixing it. But times wore on, his patience wore thin. It was taking too long and he knew it was only a matter of time before the Fourth War would break out once more and set the course of history down the exact same spiral. You have chosen your warrior of hope, Hagoromo. And now I have chosen my own. He closed his eyes, the torches extinguishing one by one in the same order in which they were lit. When the last flame burnt out, he was gone. Triple X. My, must you always get in my way? Kabuto asked, slipping a hand behind his back, running chakra through it. Green chakra spurred from it and began to heal his injuries, but he knew that Rin already knew when her eyes glanced down. Damn sensory ninja. Oh no, you don't. She whipped out a kunai and launched it at his head. The steel soared through the air and almost impaled Kabuto in the neck, but he had inclined his head just barely in time. His vision was slightly turned and it gave enough time for Rin to rush forward. He predicted this. His arm lashed out and gripped her neck before she could rush any further. He smirked, twisted sadistically at the triumph he couldn't control coming out. You've somehow grown weaker, haven't you? He stated, watching her struggle to free herself from his iron grip. The pressure from it was beginning to choke her, strangled-like sound escaping her mouth that almost sounded like groans of pain. He had no doubt that it was her will that had gotten weaker and not her physical strength, but it was affecting it. He wondered what could have done such a thing, but found it quite irrelevant at the moment. Sowing the benefits was all that mattered for now. His eyes grew darker and colder, the ideal eyes a shinobi should have and the personified eyes of a killer. Chakra began to circulate violently in his other hand that he had relaxed on the side of him. It materialized outside of his body and covered his hand in dense and sharp energy. I suppose it's my turn for payback. The chakra scalpel zoomed through the air at speeds Rin's eyes could barely track. Because of the way she was held, she knew she would not be able to get out of the way in time to avoid injury. Through a slightly squeezed windpipe, she gasped and her eyes widened in surprise as the sharp weapon came closer and closer to her head. Suddenly, it stopped. She felt pain on the top of her face above her eyes. Body frozen with shock, her eyes trailed up and she could see the blood beginning to run down his face, but she could not feel it. It was probably her body still going through immense shock, or maybe the adrenaline pumping through her veins drowned it out. She didn't know, but it didn't matter as well. I won't let you kill her. Her eyes swiveled over to her side and her breath got caught in her throat when she saw Tenzo. His raised arm was shaking against Kabuto's, barely able to keep the shinobi from running the rest of his scalpel through her head. Tenzo, why are you saving me, even though you tried to kill me before? Aren't you a traitor? The thoughts running through her mind was scaring even her. She thought back to the letter she sent out for reinforcements and knew that it definitely reached Konoha by now and that a team was most likely on the way to help. That would also mean that they were on the way to capture Tenzo because she said he was a traitor. Was she wrong about him? Was he a loyal ninja to Konoha? I thought the two of you were enemies. Kabuto stated, arms still stuttering back and forth, fighting against the strength of Tenzo's. He glanced to the side at the blank face Tenzo wore, silently gauging the Umbu member. Their eyes connected with the other and they continued to stare for what seemed like years, both measuring the other out and looking for the next move. I wonder what caused the change of heart. Kabuto. His eyes grew dreary and the intensity they once held receded into an almost black stare. If I were to give you information regarding where my orders come from, would you give me information regarding Orochimaru? Kabuto was immediately suspicious. His brain went through his words time and time again until a headache almost formed from all of the thinking. What's he trying to play it here? He's obviously trying to gain information from me, and he thinks I'll talk if he tells me something about his superior. I already suspect it to be Danzo anyway, but I'm game. The playful glint in his eyes showed exactly what he thought. I was wondering why he didn't just kill me instead of protecting Rin. Kabuto hummed, slightly lifting his head as if seriously considering the offer. I'll have to decline. The sudden declaration hadn't sparked a single reaction out of Tenzo, but his mind was another matter completely. Regardless, if we do this little trade of information you have in mind, neither of us can be sure the other one is telling the truth. I know you're smart enough to know that. Kabuto's eyes bore into Tenzo's. Aren't you? Tenzo said nothing and only stared at the other before closing his eyes slowly, leaving Kabuto to wonder what he was thinking next on his mind. Slowly, Tenzo opened his mouth and let his tongue be freely seen. Kabuto saw what he was showing. There was a sealing jutsu on his tongue that Kabuto had already made an assumption on its purpose just from seeing it. If I were to gauge it by where it's at, then wouldn't that mean he can't speak about who's giving him orders? His eyes went over the seal time and time again. He wanted to confirm that it actually was a seal and not just a normal tattoo. He would feel embarrassed if he were tricked in such a common way. Well, as common as a seal master was. Eventually, he confirmed what he was seeing was, in fact, a seal and that it was active. Kabuto almost sneered at him when the other man put his tongue back in his mouth. Do you think I'm some type of idiot? If this seal prevents you from speaking about your master, how are we supposed to trade information? It was fair on Kabuto's part. He wouldn't gain anything even if he did tell the wood user about his plans. It doesn't prevent me from talking about him. Yamato said quickly. The seal will help you figure out if I'm telling the truth. How? Kabuto asked immediately. It didn't make much sense from what he could tell from the seal. He wasn't a sealing master, but he knew it had a restriction part laced into it. If it restricted him, then whatever he was going to say had to be TR. Tenzo saw the way his eyes widened in realization and nodded. Yes. Kabuto considered for a moment, looking back and forth between the shook Rin and Tenzo, whose gaze had once again intensified. Suddenly, to Tenzo's relief, he had calmed his chakra and his chakra scalpel dissipated. Immediately, Tenzo leaped back after removing himself from Kabuto's arms and grabbed Rin at the same time. He heard her pant in exhaustion as Kabuto looked on at the duo with a certain glint in his eyes that Tenzo couldn't quite place. He pushed his glasses up to his face. I'm done with my part of our deal. Now yours. Triple X. Ha 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 ha. Yurashiki bellowed, head held high as both he and his opponent soared high above the ground. I'll crush you. Don't think for a second that you're better than me. He raced forward with a trail of chakra behind him. He began circling the Susanoo, turning the once simple sky into an amazing light show. He had ended up high above the Susanoo before rushing down with flurry of colors trailing. Obito picked up the movement with ease but hadn't been able to capitalize when a dark portal appeared between the two. He didn't realize another was opening under his Susanoo until it was too late. When Yurashiki raced through the portal, he came out from another underneath the Susanoo and raced up its large body. Obito actually spit up spittle as Yurashiki had broke through the head of his Susanoo and actually smashed a fist into his stomach. He was sent flying with speeds that dramatically broke through the speed barrier and sent hellish-like winds across the area of a 10 kilometers radius. Obito gained control of himself in no time and opened his eyes to see Yurashiki charging chakra into a single hand. Somehow his power skyrocketed. Die! The celestial being released a large, deadly serpent made purely out of lightning style. As it raced through the air at him, it discharged several amounts of lightning that zoomed to the ground and scattered, blasting the ground below with high-powered energy. It was so close to Obito that he could feel the heat coming from it, but he disappeared in a blur. Yurashiki's arm lashed out. "You can't hide from me. I can sense you." Obito was surprised when the lightning serpent had shot at his new location and released multiple large bolts of lightning at him. Obito ran across the open field so fast that the ground below him was breaking apart from the force. The lightning trailer and smashed into the ground, trying to hit him but failed each and every time. He would always jump, sidestep, or leap back in time to avoid being hit in his slightest. "It's over!" Yurashiki yelled, quickly extending his palm in front of him. A ball of energy formed in it and chakra began to spew together in a light show all around him. A crazed grin on his face, he shot the ball at Obito and it began to grow larger and large until Obito couldn't even see past it any longer. There's no chance of escape. Time seemed to slow as the giant blast rushed to him and the lightning still chasing him from behind. Obito slowly extended his own palm. He had 5 seconds before impact. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Almighty push. His Rinnegan glowed wildly, godly power flashing everywhere before an invisible force of gravity pushed on the incoming attacks. His clothes and hair tussled about fiercely, but it looked like he was nowhere near giving up. Slowly, he added more and more of his chakra, and the barrier continued to grow stronger and stronger. The attacks could no longer press the barrier, and with a shout, Obito sent the attacks flying with tremendous force, equaling a bomb dropping on the ground and exploding. "Gah!" bellowed Yurashiki as he skidded to a halt along the ground. He huffed angrily, baring his teeth as the dust began to clear. He had been pushed to his breaking point and still had barely made a dent in his opponent. On top of that, with their fight he could clearly tell that they had been moved away miles from where they originally began fighting. Has he been drawing me away purposely? His eyes narrowed and he shook his head. That's irrelevant. I'm already here, so now I just need to focus on finding the Ninetales brat. Yurashiki couldn't help his surprise when Obito shot at him like a speeding bullet. Yurashiki's arm lashed out, fingers balling into a fist only for it to go through Obito. His eyes barely had time to widen in surprise before Obito was already behind him and sent a devastatingly sharp kick to the back of his head. He felt the familiar feeling of wind rushing in his face but knew that he didn't have any control over his body. His mouth twisted in rage and a snarl escaped his mouth. All at once he extended all 4 of his limbs, stopping his momentum with a screeching halt. "Enough of this nonsense!" Yurashiki yelled, releasing a pulse of air with the speed of his movements. "I'm down here," Obito said leisurely, gaining his attention. A mirth of a smirk appeared on his face before he left her his arm tauntingly. His fingers signaled for the Otsutsuki to come and get him. "Bastard!" Yurashiki gritted out, slicing through the air at speeds that caused a sonic boom. Obito's eyes showed no emotion at his speeding foe. This was all part of his plan. He briefly closed his eyes and his chakra began to build up inside of him as Yurashiki converged on his position. "Die!" A fist caved into the ground with force that felt like it had created a small earthquake briefly. "I missed." He knew the feeling of crush a human well and felt nothing but the ground beneath his fist. Yurashiki turned behind him, hearing the sound of Obito skidding along the ground away from him. Bastard! While Yurashiki was very into their fight at the moment, Obito was actually the exact opposite. Ever since he had been able to lead Yurashiki away and fight him without distraction, he had very quickly come to a conclusion about the Otsutsuki. He was a fool, pretty dumb, and most of all Obito was much stronger than him. With that detail known by him, it only caused Obito to become increasingly bored the longer the fight drew out, though he still was pretty annoyed at the persistent pain before him. Is that all the information I can get from him though? The question had run through his head many times, and he found that it was the reason the celestial being was still breathing. If there were a whole clan like this, then he needed to know one more thing from the Otsutsuki. Was there a class system, and where did he stand? Obito wanted to say that this Yurashiki was off the lower class, but he couldn't be sure. But he had to be. His plan had no room for error, and he knew an error like this would definitely be a problem. You pest, Yurashiki gritted, face twisted in both anger and a hint of annoyance. Why won't you just die? When chakra suddenly flared around Yurashiki, Obito tensed before getting into a low fighting stance, ignoring his instincts telling him to get away. He needed to watch and observe carefully. Anything the Otsutsuki did needed to be filed down in his mind for any abilities the clan could share. He would compare his findings from what he remembered from fighting Kagaya when he wasn't busy. His Sharingan had saw the chakra in color and enabled him to see just how much was being built up. He had to admit that he was impressed. This was bordering on Kagaya's level before she gained control over herself. Obito watched in anticipation as the chakra began to form into what looked like a serpent from what he could tell. Sharp wind rushed him from every angle, but it hadn't even distracted him. He only kept his eyes forward as Yurashiki continued to grow stronger and stronger. I'm finishing this, he announced loudly in finality, and Obito agreed. He's drawn this out for as long as he could. He hadn't gained much information verbally, but he would gain the information he seemed regardless. He had just thought of another way. Obito clasped his hands together into a seal and his own chakra began to stir. It was violent, like a raging river crashing into rocks non-stop, and it only worsened the more his chakra began to grow. He calmed himself. He supposed it was really time to finish this enemy off for good, and he would use his newest technique to do so. Black marks began to spread from his chest and quickly reached parts of his entire body. Long lines ran down his arms and legs all the way to his face, where it had moved into curved spikes on the sides of his face. This was his own special Sage mode. He had always been able to use Sage techniques when he added his reservoir of 6 paths chakra from his time as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. He had been practicing with the technique for years to get it down just because of how difficult it actually was to control the chakra without a catalyst like the Ten Tails feeding it to him. It's time to finish this, the alien bellowed, unaware of Obito's sudden and explosive power increase. Amino Subaru Boshino Makoto, Ryugu. Obito let his sinister side slip and an almost creepy grin formed on his face. His hand twitched open and chakra began to swirl in it rapidly. The air around him began to thin as it began to get sucked into his attack and swirl around him in a whirlwind. The attack in his hand began to grow larger and larger until it was as big as a giant boulder. 6 paths Sage Art, Giant Rasengan. The swirling ball of chakra spun in his hand before he rushed forward with a burst of speed that tore up the ground below him as he rushed toward Yurashiki's attack before slamming his attack into it. Particles of earth, air, and huge chunks of the ground were blown away by the crash, and the ground shook even more violently than when Sasuke had launched his own attack against Yurashiki. The large serpent made of chakra was deleted by Obito's attack, and Yurashiki saw the Obito's attack sailing at him and he panicked. No! He yelled desperately, holding his hand out in an attempt to keep the Rasengan away. A gurgling sound escaped his mouth when the attack slammed into him and he was sent flying into the air before it exploded in a large flash of blue light. Triple X. Not again. Kiba yelled, falling to the ground due to his lowered energy from his drawn-out fight with Sakan and Yukon. He managed to look over to see that they had fallen down as well and tried to search the clearing for his companion. All around, all of the shinobi fighting had ceased because of the rumbling earth and deafening boom caused by Obito. All of the shinobi on the ground had fallen down due to the shaking, and trees all around were uprooted from the ground fell, causing even more tremors. Then suddenly it all ended, like the calm after a storm, and it was quiet for a long time. Some gaining their breaths, while others just looked at the situation all around them. It was clear to all of them that something major just happened, but none of them knew just how much just happened in the short span of time. Obito released his 6 paths imbued Sage Mode and his Rinnegan and walked over to the large crater that his attack had carved into the ground. He stopped at its edge and looked over to see Yurashiki, what was left of him. Part of his neck was missing as well as an arm and both of his feet. He didn't heal this time, and from the lack of activity with his chakra, Obito could safely say that the Otsutsuki was dead. Good. His body is still intact, Obito said in relief. He had gone a little overboard on how much chakra he used, but was glad that he still had a body to study. Now that he knew that this was an entire clan, he wanted to be able to study them for any secrets their bodies could hold. He leaned forward and slid down the crater. He reached the remains of the Otsutsuki and knelt down beside it. For some reason he wanted to give his respects, but the guy had been such an asshole that it kinda made him want to vomit at the thought of doing such a thing. He shook his head and put a hand on the dead body before his right eye activated and a spiraling vortex sucked up the remains. Suddenly his head lifted before he vanished into thin air, leaving behind a broke battlefield. Triple X. Sasuke. Sasuke, stop. Through the dense forest, Naruto tailed behind Sasuke as he raced away. He dodged trees, tree stumps, and ran through bushes trying to reach the insufferable bastard, but somehow he was always a step behind. At least say something, Sasuke bastard. He yelled with all the rage his small body could hold. Stop running away from me. He threw his arm forward and a chakra arm materialized and cut through the air fast. Sasuke finally turned around and leaped away at the last second. The ground cracked under the force of Naruto's hand, but he was only glad that it finally made Sasuke stop as he landed on a tree. Naruto gritted his teeth as he looked at his now unrecognizable teammate. Sasuke, what the hell are you doing? I'm leaving. Are you as stupid as you look, Dobe? The way he said it as if it was just any other action made Naruto even angrier than before, and his elongated nails began to scratch deep into the ground. You bastard. He grounded out. I'm not letting Orochimaru take you away, Sasuke. He's the one that killed the 3rd Hokage and attacked the leaf. You can't side with him. Who said I was? I'm going to use him and force the truth out of my brother. Is this what this is about? He yelled in utter disbelief. Your family? You still have a family. Why do you dash? Because my family was slaughtered by someone that even my own brother Itachi can't beat. Sasuke yelled, cutting Naruto off. He understood nothing of the situation and wanted to get him to stop. What a fool he was. Then that's all the more reason you shouldn't go looking for him, Naruto reasoned, rising to his feet and glaring forward. These people kidnapped you. They don't care about you at all. Sasuke closed his eyes and sighed, shaking his head. You'll never understand me when you don't have a family in the first place. You can't try to get me to stop when you don't wake up screaming from seeing the bodies of your dead parents over and over. Naruto grimaced. He never saw Sasuke like this. The pain in his voice was something that he knew all too well. It's over, Naruto. He fixed a glare dead into Naruto's eyes, and he knew that the Uchiha was dealt serious when the next words came out of his mouth. I'm leaving. And nothing you or anyone else can do will stop that. Saying that he was prepared to leave when a sudden force knocked him and Naruto over. Sasuke grunted when he hit the ground from falling off the tree but was able to gain his senses as the rumbling continued for a couple of more seconds. Naruto did as well, and they were nearly eye to eye when it was all said and done. What was that? Naruto asked himself, getting to his feet. Sasuke was already about to leap away, but when he turned around he almost bumped into the front of a cloak. His eyes trailed up until he met the Sharingan of his older cousin. Obito. A smooth wind blew across the forest they were in, breaking through the tense silence between the three shinobi. Get away from me, Sasuke gritted, finally gaining his courage. I'm leaving. He tried to move past Obito but was grabbed by the shoulder and his hand twitched. He had almost activated the Chidori on one of his last family members. Sasuke, his voice was low and deep and he hadn't took his eyes off Sasuke from the moment he saw him. The road you take from here will be difficult and long, full of pain. I have faith that you will make it however, but I do have something to tell you. Sasuke turned to him and it made Obito pause in what he was about to say. But only for a moment. Sasuke was like Indra, but while he held hatred inside of him, it simply wasn't enough to where he would win his fight against Naruto. Obito knew that, and yet, he didn't want to do this. Sometimes he did wish that he didn't let things get this far, that he could have just killed the Akatsuki leader and find Black Setsu. But he knew that if he were to do that, then when he died eventually the world wouldn't be prepared for what came later. The Otsutsuki clan. He knew that the rest were coming eventually, and he knew that he would not always be around to fight them. Sasuke, we were the ones who killed the rest of the Uchiha. It was an order from Konoha higher-ups. The surprise, the hurt in Sasuke's eyes made Obito want to take back what he said. But it was too late for that. Now that he started it, he knew he had to finish it. Why you? This has to be some type of joke, right? Sasuke demanded with clenched teeth. No. The ones who killed the Uchiha were me, Shisui, and your older brother Itachi. We killed them on orders from the higher-ups of the Leaf. Tears began to fall down the younger Uchiha's face, but when he rose it so Obito could see it, it was filled with anger. He knocked Obito's hand to the side and began to stumble away. Why you damn traitors? Is this why Itachi wouldn't tell me no matter how much I asked? Obito remained silent, but his jaw clenched at the sight of Sasuke having a mental breakdown. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest tightly, and began to cough violently. Sasuke! Naruto yelled before turning to him, Nine Tails chakra flaring. What did you do to him? It's none of your concern. It is! Naruto yelled, reaching the end of his patience. Tell me right now. What did you say? Suddenly, Sasuke ran away, tears falling down his face and spittle falling from his mouth. He was wheezing, he couldn't breathe. It was worse than when Obito had told the older Sasuke what really happened on that same, fateful day. Obito only stared, and it stayed that way for a while. Naruto could probably tell that he wasn't going to get anywhere, and a snarl escaped his mouth before he rushed after Sasuke. Hopefully this was the right decision. Hopefully this would work. This truly was the only way. Chapter 51. Obito probably didn't know how odd he looked standing motionless in the forest with his eyes closed. He had been thinking about his decision over and over since Naruto had ran off after Sasuke, and even now he still couldn't tell if he made the right decision or not. Maybe he would never find out. That was a frightening possibility and one that made him sick. He knew he had to save the world, but he wanted to keep his morals in line. He needed something that would tell him how far was too far. It was the same when he was the leader of the Akatsuki, working toward the infinite Tsukiyomi. He had no regard of his actions and truly believed that killing, torturing, or using people were all necessary evils that would eventually save the world. He refused to go back to that. Hey! A calm voice broke through his thoughts and he opened his eyes and turned to it. He was surprised to see a rather beaten-up Neji who seemed like he had just been through a rather tough fight. Seemed he won though. Naruto and Sasuke went this way, right? Obito was quiet for the longest moment, not knowing how he would answer that question. He decided he would gain nothing if he lied. They were close to where they would be fighting and he knew his Byakugan would enable him to see from their distance. Yes, they did. Neji nodded and broke out into a run. Thanks. He didn't get a chance to go 5 more steps before Obito was in front of him, blocking him from moving ahead. Sorry, but I can't let you go past this point. The boys need to work this out themselves. The next couple of moments were filled with silence and he wondered what was going through the kid's head because he was just staring into Obito's black eyes. Obito couldn't hold his surprise in when the boy's eyes changed. It was like his Byakugan had sprouted its own Mangekyo. black lines circled into crescents now circled around his pupils. With this eyes, I can clearly see the destiny ahead. He spoke like he knew, and Obito believed every word that came from his mouth. Sasuke will come victorious in his battle against Naruto, and that will set him on a spiral. We have to stop it now, so why are you in the way? Obito's answer came very well before he could think. It's the way it needs to be. Another long silence, painfully long. But when the Hyuga finally spoke, his words left a deep, retching feeling in his gut that he wouldn't be able to shake for a long time. Hamura Otsutsuki introduced himself to me as the Sage of Six Paths brother, and he gave me power as well as memories. Obito, you are the one that caused all of that other pain before and the Great Fourth War. That killed me as well. At that point, he couldn't keep his body from shaking. He didn't know if it was from fear, the pain of all those memories that he tries to lock away hitting him at once, or the fact that someone he killed personally knew it and was staring right at him with a new power. You're Hagoromo's warrior, so while you have your own methods, I'll have mine as well. And what you're doing now is something that I can't agree with. You'll only cause another war. You have no idea what you're talking about. Niji crossed his arms, glaring. Oh? Is that because you killed me? Is that why I don't understand? Obito couldn't help the anger that deeper into his voice. It's not like that. The world is more than the Akatsuki and war. It has other people, other villages, other powers that you haven't come across. You have to trust Dash. A single word silenced him. No. There's no way I'd ever trust you. You're a killer, my killer. There's no way I could trust you. And even besides that, from what I've seen so far, what you've done to save the world is practically nothing. Barely anything has changed, and I find myself just what the hell you've been doing this entire time. His anger had been boiling with every word said to him, and when it was all said he had reached his absolute boiling point. He wasn't even as mad when he fought Urashiki. First of all, I don't need some kid who understands nothing about repercussions and anomalies when dealing with changing the past. I apologize for killing you in the past if that helps you, but what's done is done, and that's all I can do to make it better. His eyes narrowed and he spoke with clenched teeth. I've been trying hard and I let nothing distract me from my goals. Is not the best, I know that, but it's predictable. That's the best way to save the world. The wrenching in his gut hadn't stopped. It was getting worse and worse the longer he had this conversation. It seemed all too clear that Niji would not have the same opinion on how to fix the world. He could now only wonder if Niji was strong enough to get in his way, and what exactly he would do if the Byakugan-wielding ninja actually did. Niji turned away from him and closed his eyes. I suppose I'll let you keep the helm of this. Obito's eyes narrowed when the prodigy half turned to him and looked him dead in the eye. For now. Don't let it go to your head, however. As I said earlier, I do not trust you, nor do I think I ever will. I can tell that you're stronger than me and that I will only die again if I were to get in the way of whatever you have planned, but I do plan to train hard and I will catch up. And when that happens, everything won't happen the way you want them to. In a blur of chakra, the Hyuga was gone, leaving him with a whole slew of emotions that he hadn't even felt before. But one of them was something he felt all too well, and he knew it. Rage. He lashed out, gripping the tree that stood tall beside him. It gave way to the force of his hand, cracking. Wood splinters flew throughout the forest and his face turned to a grimace. Damn it! Hot tears slipped down his face and he could feel his chakra storing around inside him, begging to be released. He didn't know if his choices would actually lead to the peace of the world. When he thought about it, killing Madara wasn't something that he had done to actually rid the world of someone so evil. In fact, almost everything he had done was not for the benefit for the entire world, or at least that wasn't his main goal. He looked down at his hand that had clenched so tightly that it began to bleed and a tear fell on it. The reason he was doing this, the true reason on the inside, was because he wanted to redeem himself, even though he knew he was beyond that. Some part of him wanted to go back and fix his image because before him was something that he created. Would the infinite Tsukuyomi had been like this? Something fake that he created? The world was basically his to control, he had the strength and the political power to do what he wanted, but now that he saw what it would bring, what he felt like, he knew he would never get that closure. He would never get over Rin's death. He knew that, and even so, he tried. Every day he tried. The pain in his chest increased and a sickening feeling passed inside him. He wanted to puke. He would never get over the first time he experienced real combat in the Third Shinobi War. Every time he stepped on the battlefield was filled with nothing but pain. He saw things that had changed him little by little. And when Rin died, he changed forever. No matter what happened in his life, he felt that it was impossible for him to get over that. I'm still the same as I was. No, his grimace deepened. I'm the worst. I don't truly do this for the sake of the entire world. He was trying in futility to rectify his past actions, and he actually thought he was doing good. He sent Sasuke back on his downward spiral. He forced Itachi and Shisui to kill their family and live with that grief, keeping it locked away from their friends and Sasuke. He allowed the Akatsuki to form because he didn't find Black Zetsu and kill him. He allowed the Mist to become viewed as barbarians when he could have stopped it. He allowed Hiruzen and Minato to die simply because he didn't know or didn't want to see what would happen had they stayed alive. He allowed Naruto to continue to live his horrible life without lifting a finger. He allowed Nagato to stay on his path of being manipulated when he could have stopped it. He allowed Danzo to mind control, kill, and manipulate people to avoid political confusion. He allowed him to kill the daimyo. He allowed civilians and shinobi to be killed by his attack. The extent of what he was willing to do was even worse. He was willing to let the war break out again, which would kill hundreds of thousands of shinobi, ruin villages, and allow innocent Jinchuriki to get hunted down and killed just to capture innocent Tailsbeast and use them for power. And if he were honest, he wouldn't change any of it. It was his burden. What he deserved for even thinking he actually had a way to make up for all he had done. He crossed the moral event horizon long ago and knew decades ago when he had done it that it was no going back. Blood dripped onto the ground and he forced in a breath through a tightly closed mouth. Obito? Obito slowly raised his head up and his onyx eyes met brown ones. Slowly, through slightly puffed up eyes, he began to recognize Rin. He looked surprised to see her. Rin? She gulped and stood straighter. It seemed to build courage in her. We need to talk. And I want the truth. About everything. XXX. Mission completed here, I guess. Shikamaru turned his head to Gaara, who had stood up beside him with crossed arms. Before them was a large amount of sand that had formed a sort of wall, and in the middle of it was Tayuya. They had opted to trap her as she had been the only one to survive her battle. Niji had killed Kadamaru, Choji had killed Jirobo, Kiba had heavily injured Sakan and Yukon before Kankuro showed up and finished the strongest member without difficulty. Tayuya was about to meet her own fate at the hands of Temari, but her jutsu had been deflected by Gaara's sand just in time to save her. He thought it would be a good idea to get information from at least one of them, and since he happened to be close, he decided it would be her. After he had saved her, he restrained her tightly, not wanting her to escape or try any jutsu. I suppose so. Temari grunted, landing beside the duo. Wish I could have killed her though. It would have at least been worth my while. Well, I'm glad you didn't. I'm sure the Hokage would love this gift at their doorstep. Shikamaru's hands slipped in his pockets casually and his posture slumped. We'll have information on this Orochimaru soon enough. Let me go, you damn chumps. Tayuya yelled, thrashing about as she tried to fight against the sand. I won't give you any information, so there's no point in keeping me alive. Shikamaru smirked, eyeing her. Oh, don't worry. With the skill of our shinobi, you won't have to say a word. We have ways of getting information without all the extra noise. She snarled. You fucking bitch. Watch your mouth. Temari warned, a strange feeling in her gut. Gaara rose a single hand at the red head. That's enough out of you. His sand rose quickly and covered her mouth tightly. She glared at him only to receive and blank stare back, and it only made her angrier. She thrashed around more violently before grimacing. She could finally see that there was no escape. Gaara closed his arms again just as Tenten arrived with Ino on her back. She crouched low and began to slowly let the girl on the large branch softly as Shikamaru jogged over. Ino! He stopped beside Tenten and helped the unconscious Ino be set on the ground softly. What happened to her? It was when you were knocked out that we fought something. We still don't know what he was, but it was some guy and he was super strong. He had this like glowing fishing pole and he struck her out of the air. Tenten explained as simple as possible. Where is he now then? I don't know, but he took Naruto with him. He did? Shikamaru asked. But I was just with the idiot and he was with the woman that we were supposed to find and save alongside Sasuke. We split when he went after this white-haired guy that had grabbed Sasuke. That would mean he got away, correct? Gaara asked. Yeah, I guess. Then we need to find that guy that captured Sasuke and kill him. Temari said. Maybe this guy would give them more of a challenge. They practically breezed through the others. They all turned when they heard someone land beside them and turned to see that it was Kankuro and Kiba. Kankuro leaned down and gently placed an injured on the ground who grunted despite his soft landing. Anyone a medic? He's losing quite a bit of blood. While none of them were medics, some of them had supplies and Tenten immediately went to work into patching Shino's wounds. She wasn't a medical ninja by any stretch of the imagination, and was only stopping the bleeding by applying a degree of force to the wound, but she did know what to do simply because she watched other medical ninja at work when she tries to become like Tsunade. Anyone seen Hinata? I don't even smell her near here. Kiba asked. No, I haven't seen her. Tenten asked, briefly pausing in her work. Who? Temari asked with a raised eyebrow. Damn. Kiba gritted. We're not only missing her but Sakura and Niji too. Don't worry about that. A voice spoke and they all turned to see Niji almost completely uninjured with Sakura thrown over his shoulder, unconscious. Niji, what happened to you? Tenten asked. You San Shinobi. Niji said, entirely ignoring his teammate. You have defeated all of our enemies, yes? Gaara nodded and Niji gave a look of acknowledgement. He let Sakura off his shoulders and set her gently on the large tree branch. They talked more as they regrouped, unaware of what was happening a couple dozen of meters away from them. Triple X. I hope you don't try to run from this. Kabuto said, pushing his glasses up smugly. I might not be stronger than you at the moment, but with how weak Rin is I should be able to distract you long enough to kill her and I might even be able to get away. Tenzo knew that it was no bluff and took the very easy-to-see threat seriously. Of course I know that. I'll tell you anything you wish to know. Kabuto mocked, hummed with closed eyes. I suppose I'll address the elephant in the room. Your leader is Danzo, correct? Tenzo's breath seized in his throat and a strangling noise escaped his mouth. His eyes twitched as his body seized up, but it was only for a moment. A calming breath escaped his mouth a second later and his body relaxed. It was at that moment that Kabuto saw that seal that had blown up briefly and a smirk crossed his features. It actually worked. Rin glared at him for his smirk, but it only caused him amusement. Ah, so it does work. Excellent. A dangerous glint flowed up his eyes. I wonder what I should ask next. A pain-filled groan filled air and all three shinobi turned to see that it was Kimimaro barely able to keep up to his knees. Blood seeped from the corners of his mouth and through his teeth and strangled breathing escaped into the air. Kimimaro? Kabuto thought in utter shock, not able to hide it. What the hell is he doing here? His body isn't able to handle the stress of moving. Tenzo had saw that shock and the recognition on Kabuto's face and made his move. Before any of them could even take another breath, he had a knee painfully pressed on Kimimaro's back and held his head up by his hair with a kunai placed at his throat. Wait! Stop! Rin cried out, attempting to get up but stumbling back to the ground in exhaustion. She could tell the teen needed treatment badly with a single glance. Kabuto produced a chakra scalpel and made to run only to be stopped inches into it as Tenzo pressed the knife up to Kimimara's throat enough to cause slight bleeding. "Don't even think about coming at Rin. If you do, I'll kill him in a flash." Kabuto was fuming, wishing he had killed Rin when he had the chance, but also because he could not risk someone as precious as Kimimaro to die. Even in his sick state, he was useful to his master. There was no way he could sacrifice that life. Through gritted teeth and a clenched body, he released his jutsu and remained still. Tenzo stared, and a moment after he lowered the kunai away from Kimimaro, but close enough to where he could slash his throat before Kabuto could move even a single foot. "Tenzo," Rin said suddenly. "I might not have been in the Umbu like you and Kakashi, but I know you." She rose her head to meet his eyes with her own. "I know that you like to preserve Liv and that you're gentle. So I'm begging you, as a friend, don't injure him. Not even as leverage." Tenzo's eyes had widened and softened. Her pleading tone seemed to be getting through to him, and he actually, for a moment, considered her. He didn't know that he was going to do, but he did know that he didn't actually want to hurt that teen. He never wanted to hurt anyone. That's too bad. Tenzo looked under him, and all in an instant, he felt unbelievable amounts of pain. "I'm no one's leverage." Several large bones suddenly cut through Kimimaro's skin and impaled Tenzo. One through his chest, another through his leg, and last but not least one on his abdomen. Blood was everywhere, and Tenzo was sure he was going to die. He felt his consciousness slipping and was unaware of the true extent of his bad of a shape his body was in. His brain was no longer even aware of what was happening around because of the blood loss, and he would probably die of his brain being deprived of oxygen before he died of blood loss. "Tenzo, no!" Rin yelled, pushing her exhausted body up, and she tried to run to help. Kabuto smirked like a madman and raced forward while using chakra to recreate his chakra scalpel. Rin froze and stared wide-eyed as the speed that Kabuto was moving it was almost too fast for her to see. She was going to die. Leaf Hurricane. A powerful kick smashed into Kabuto's gut when he was meters away from Rin, and he was sent miles away, landing harshly on the ground. Rin took deep, heavy breaths and looked at the boy who had saved her. In his signature stance, Rock Lee smirked after taking a slow intake of air. Beside him was Sai with a scroll in hand, and his face just as blank as ever. "It seems our timing was perfect. I guess my new jutsu was worth my while." "You're correct." Rock Lee sent an enthusiastic thumbs up his way. "Your ink bird really saved us." When he turned back to who had just hit, he was surprised to see that he was already up, but not without injury. It might have been a sneak attack on his part, but he nevertheless enjoyed the damage he had done. Kabuto wiped blood off the corner of his lips. He could feel the adrenaline that once fueled his body had already run out, and he was running on fumes. Despite that, he still had enough energy to mock the shinobi in front of him. My. What a sight to behold. I'm surprised you can even run like that, much less walk. It seems like Lady Tsunade more than lives up to her reputation. Rock Lee felt a strange emotion bubble inside him, but only narrowed his eyes. Behind him, Sai turned to Rin, who was still frozen in place. He smiled at her, but she thought it looked a bit off. "You should check on both of them. They look in bad shape." "We'll handle this." Rin looks unsure but nodded regardless. "Yeah, I got it." She jogged over to where the two were and began doing her job. "I need to kill these two fast," Kabuto thought. "I can tell that they won't get out of my way, and I can't let her heal Tenzo. Furthermore, I have to control my temper. I almost killed Rin a couple of times, and I need her alive to heal Orochimaru. But I wonder." He watched her treat both Tenzo and Kimimaro at once and grew curious. Very curious. "I wonder if she can heal Kimimaro as well." "Hey!" Rock Lee called out, gaining the Jounen's attention. "Don't ignore me. I'm your opponent." Kabuto smirked, his chakra scalpel once again appeared in his hand. "I suppose you're correct. Let's see what you can do." He raced forward and his arm flew out before him. Rock Lee could see it coming, but before he could move himself, Sai did, rushing in front of him and blocking the chakra scalpel with his tanto. Kabuto clicked his teeth in annoyance as the two separated from each other, bright sparks flying off their weapons. Rock Lee swiveled around Sai and throws a kick, but was blocked and swatted away. Sai took his place immediately and aimed well-timed strikes with his tanto, but he missed every single time. Not only was he dodging, but he saw through the telegraphed moves and slammed a fist into his face, knocking him away. With a yell, Rock Lee slid in behind and shook the ground when he planted his feet and sent several consecutive punches that Kabuto was able to block, but not without consequence. He gritted his teeth in pain as his body shook from the blows. Enough of this! Kabuto yelled out, suddenly Lee's fist, but he was prepared. He tugged on the man and leaned back, bringing a powerful leg up and into Kabuto's jaw, and his head snapped up so fast that he almost knocked himself out. Rock Lee righted himself in the air and landed with a bit of amusement in his steps. A direct hit. Sai landed beside him and they watched closely as the older shinobi gained back his senses before glaring at them, but both remained unshaken. Kabuto was barely keeping himself on his feet at that point. He had used up so much chakra that he couldn't kill a genin, and he was even having trouble keeping up with him. This was bad, very, very bad. He needed to plan his next move, and it needed to happen now. Rin had just finally separated Tenzo's body from the bones that had perturbed into him, and she could see that he had already begun to heal in his own, and he would be able to survive for a couple of minutes without her support, to her relief. She steeled her mind with an intake of breath before turning to the enemy. He was young. He looked around 17 or 18 and looked quite pale and very sick. She could tell with a look that something was affecting his body, and she could see that he was not supposed to be moving at this point. She got to work instantly, a feeling overwhelming the fact that he had just hurt a comrade, and she was glad she did. He wouldn't have survived a second longer without the aid of her chakra. As she continued to heal his body, she could feel that there was something internal that was affecting him and that healing him was only delaying that inevitable. He's got some type of disease. And it looks very deadly. Perhaps incurable. But if so, what's he doing here? And how is he moving? She's about to do some type of surgery on Kimimaro? Kabuto thought with untrusting eyes. What's she thinking? He turned instantly when he heard the sound of rapidly fast footsteps approaching him. It was Rock Lee who had leaped into the air. Leaf Hurricane. He sent a powerful kick that Kabuto was able to block, although barely, and it rattled his arm. Damn! No way someone who was just injured should have this much power in their strikes. The moment was over in a flash as Rock Lee leaped away a couple of meters. We are in a fight. So, do not forget about me. You're a nobody, get out of my way. He isn't a nobody. Sai interrupted, a strange feeling passing through him. You shouldn't say such mean things. I've read a book Abu Dash. Enough! Kabuto yelled. He started to pant wildly, like a dog outside on a hot day. I need a way out. This mission is already complete and Sasuke is gone. There's no reason for me to stay any longer. His breathing had finally calmed and he grinned mischievously. He rose his hands up in the air in an act of surrender. I give up. You win. Sasuke is yours to take back. Rock Lee arms lowered with a noticeable disappointment. You quit? But our fight dash. You win. He interrupted smoothly. I have no more energy to waste here. You're simply too strong for someone as weak as me. He's lying. Rin yelled meters away from them, glaring hard at the man. He's trying to get away. Rock Lee would have rushed forward had he not been stopped by Sai, who had rushed in front of him. Don't chase. Let him leave. What? Why? Rock Lee asked. If we follow him, he'll just lead us to Orochimaru of the Sannin. We can't fight someone like him. Sai had realized that before any of the others did, but their talk only led to Kabuto using the body flicker to get away. It's better this way. Sai said. I hope you are correct. Rin had refocused her mind into healing the teen, but she already knew she was only prolonging his life. With no one to help sustain him and no time grab any supplies for detailed surgery, she was basically a human life preserver, and the thought alone caused her anger. She became a nurse to save lives, not to just preserve them. She hated the word in a medical sense. How long can you do this? Rin wondered, her eyes beginning to waver. She had used a lot of chakra fighting against Kabuto and was no using such an abundance in one flowing motion that the strain was beginning to cause her to get tired, and she didn't know just how long she could hold out for. She knew it wasn't for long. Rock Lee and Sai jogged over to her, and Rock Lee leaned down to see Kimimaro while Sai looked over the slowly healing but unconscious Tenzo. Kimimaro's predicament was as clear as day to the taijutsu user. He's in a really bad situation. Rock Lee muttered before turning to her with a look. Will he be able to make it back to the leaf? Rin wanted to say yes, to be positive, but she already knew the truth. With sad eyes, she looked back down at the teen. No, he won't. The second I stop using my chakra on him, he'll die. We have no way to transfer him back to the leaf in time to save him life. So, what do we do? Lee asked slowly, and Rin sighed, almost sounding like she was about to cry. I can tell that you're getting tired. We might have to just dash. Before she could give out her suggestion, a pale arm flew at them and caused her to grab Lee and leap away as she thought it was some type of weapon. When she landed, she realized what it truly was. And the thought almost crushed her. It was nothing more than a stray arm, disconnected from its supposed owner, and now she wasn't giving her chakra to the boy anymore. Her limbs lost strength and she shrunk to her knees. No way. She muttered. No way, I just did that. Rock Lee ran to the body and crouched instantly, putting his head to his chest. He could hear no heartbeat and feel no pulse. The teen, who looked about his age, maybe a small bit older, was dead. Damn it. No. Stop. Sai told the spandex-wearing ninja, gripping him on his shoulder. He's dead, and a comrade will die too if we don't leave now. Lee looked over Sai and saw the awful form Tenzo was in, and it only caused his morale to deflate, if only for a bit. I see. He turned back to the Kimimaro one last time before standing to his feet slowly. Super Beast Scroll. A bird made of pure ink and chakra materialized before them, and even Rin was surprised. She had never seen anything like it. Come on. It's time we leave. They were unaware of the hand that had begun to move on Kimimaro. Triple X. Heavy rain fell down from the sky and thumped repeatedly on the ground as if in a rhythm. It was almost slow in a way. Rain droplets fell methodically on the ground, washing away bloodstains and giving relief to raging fires that burnt up the ground and surrounding vegetation. In the middle of it all were two individuals. Two shinobi. Both scratched up, burned, bruised, and most of all broken. Naruto was on the ground, completely unconscious, while Sasuke stood over him, almost nose to nose. Water dripped down Sasuke's face, hitting Naruto's in a constant soft rhythm. Sasuke's blank eyes were filled with tears, but it was like he wasn't even in his own body as he stared lifeless lay down at Naruto's. He wasn't even moving. Sasuke had won. Slowly, the beat-up shinobi backed away but immediately fell down onto the muddy ground. He laid opposite to Naruto for several seconds before finally deciding that it was time for him to go. It was time for him to leave all those memories and all those good times he spent with his team, his friends in the past. He needed to pursue that revenge for his family, his true family. The ones that didn't kill their own selfishly and didn't lie to him in his face for 5 whole years. All of those memories with them were nothing but frauds. They didn't care about him, or they would have told him the truth. That's why I must move forward. He finally reached his feet, but they were shaking. Maybe he was scared to leave the village, but the conviction to avenge his family, the memories of his constant nightmares and insomnia moved him forward. Thank you, Naruto. Thank you for everything. The rain seemed to intensify every step he took away from Naruto. Itachi, Shisui, Obito, Izumi. I vow to kill you all. Something changed in his eyes. A new pattern took shape as he walked and walked until it finally settled on something new. His Mangekyo Sharingan had awakened. Chapter 52. For Jonin speed through the dense forest so fast that the leaves on the trees and the grass moved literal seconds after they had raced by. They could all tell that the battle had started a while ago and that multiple battles had happened. Kakashi, Guy, and Izumi specifically knew because they knew some of the chakra signatures present like the back of their own hands. Guy could sense all three of his students and Kakashi sensed all of his. But the one that troubled him was Sasuke's. It wasn't faded like Naruto and Sakura had, he assumed they had been knocked out, but it was fading away because he was leaving. He was getting further and further away from them, and when Kakashi realized it, Guy could barely keep up with him. Izumi shared Kakashi's haste, but the worry in her mind kept her from saying anything about it. They had sent the future of the Hidden Leaf on what was essentially an A-rank mission, and only one of them were Chunin. And he wasn't the strongest. Anko had definitely been the calmest one, but not even she could speak seeing the mood her teammates were in. She knew, she could feel that something happened. Something wasn't right in the air and the darkening sky didn't help at all. Not all of them are at the same place. I can sense Obito and Rin. I'll meet up with them. Izumi, go to Naruto's chakra. I know you can feel the 9 tails in the air. Anko, you go to where they're the most chakra signatures, and Guy, meet up with your student. We'll rendezvous later to compare our findings. Kakashi ordered after a long amount of time of no one speaking. He was captain, and even if they felt some type of way, they knew he wasn't in the mood to go back and forth and immediately split off from him. Now that he was finally alone, Kakashi couldn't help the despair creeping into his heart. The copy ninja could feel something was off by the smell of the air, and even though he knew something was wrong with Naruto, his instincts screamed at him to meet up with Rin and Obito. Because even though he could feel something had happened to Naruto, he felt a dark cloud brewing where Obito was and could feel that something bad was about to go down. He gulped and he began to move faster and faster through the forest. His heartbeat skyrocketed and he felt a pain in his chest that he couldn't describe. I have to make it. I have to. Triple X. Obito's onyx eyes stared deep into Rin's dim brown ones. For moments neither had moved. It was like they were in a trance, stuck staring at each other, and neither of them noticed. It wasn't Obito nor Rin that finally broke their soft staring contest. It was rain. Obito came to when a droplet fell on the tip of his nose and he looked up to see dark, heavy clouds hanging overhead. He wondered, despite the dark atmosphere it brought, when the clouds started to look so beautiful. Obito, a soft voice near, whispered, and slowly he looked down until he met Rin's eyes once more. They were no longer absent of emotion. They were filled with worry, with pain, and with sadness. He could tell that his lies were affecting her deeply, and he wondered why. Was it because he didn't trust her? Maybe it was more. Why are you hiding things from me and Kakashi? I thought that we were closer than that. Her thoughts went back to her conversation with Kakashi on just how much Obito had changed, and to find out that they were correct was something she could not take. She might have knew that the entire time, but she wanted to believe that he would never do something like that. But she knew better. Obito, I want you to answer me. She managed to get out, her voice breaking and cracking. Her face began to turn red and her throat felt seized. I can't. He finally said, and her eyes widened. You wouldn't understand. Slap. Obito was no longer looking at her. His face was now facing the crushed tree, and he felt a slight stinging on his cheek. Rin had begun panting, trying to keep her emotions in check as Obito turned back to her slowly. When they meet eyes again, she exploded. You're supposed to make me understand. We're teammates. That was under Minato-sensei. We've been through so much together only for you not to trust me. Keeping all these secrets and leaving the village weeks on end. Why? What is it all for? Tears flowed down her face like a waterfall, and she couldn't keep them in anymore. It's to keep you safe. Obito yelled and clenched his teeth in anger. His voice came out soft. It's to keep everyone safe. If I don't do this, then we'll all die, Rin. She muttered and bit her lip hard enough that she started to bleed. That's bullshit. It came out soft. It's to keep everyone safe. If I don't do this then we'll all die, Rin. Obito almost gawked at the word. Sure, he heard it before, but never from Rin. She never cursed. I might not know what you're talking about, but I do know that keeping your feeling locked away and keeping your friends out is beyond stupid. There's nothing you could tell us that we wouldn't be able to handle. Tell me. Tell me why you had to hide all that from us? She demanded. I can't tell you. He grounded out, forcing his head away. Rin only looked at him with wide, angry eyes. She couldn't believe that this was the bright boy that she wanted to support becoming Hokage. He looked so broken, so hurt. It was a look she never would have accustomed to him, and it hurt her just to see him like this. You really won't tell me? She asked in a small voice. Didn't you love me, Obito? If you love someone you tell them the truth. Obito's head snapped back to her and he locked his eyes with hers. Surprise etched on his face, he asked shakily, why you knew? Since we were in the academy, Obito. Because I knew what love felt like even back then. Because the same way you felt about me I still feel that way about Kakashi. Even to this day. Obito felt a stinging pain in his heart, and he didn't know why. He knew she loved Kakashi and that Kakashi had some type of interest in her, but to hear her say it was another matter entirely. Maybe he couldn't accept that fact that the only woman he actually loved just didn't love him back. Memories rushed to his head. So many that it had begun to hurt. While all of them were important to him, one stuck out. Wake up to reality. Nothing ever goes as planned in this accursed world. The longer you live, the more you realize that in this reality, only pain, suffering, and futility exist. In this world, wherever there is light, there are also shadows. As long as the concept of winners exists, there must also be losers. The selfish desire of wanting to maintain peace causes wars, and hatred is born to protect love. Madara. Madara's actions were the most influential actions that involved his life, and he could see that they were affecting him still to this day. It was that very reason that Obito had seeked the man out and killed him. Because his actions led to Obito's downward spiral, and he felt as if he would never truly get over his past. He felt his wet hair sticking to his forehead and could hear the rain pounding on the ground all around him. He allowed a breath, finding his resolve. He knew that he no longer needed to be in Konoha. It was plain to see that he still was tied down by feelings that should have been done away with long ago, and knew that he would never get over it. Everything he had done in the Hidden Leaf, like going out with his friends, fun sparring, trips with Jiraiya, having a wife, and thinking about kids, all of that was just a complete waste of time. Rin, he finally met her eyes with his fiery, crazed ones. Forgive me for what I'm about to do. The glint of his kunai was the only thing Rin could follow, as it had moved so fast from his cloak that she could even see its blur. Rin let out a breath when she noticed that she was no longer in front of Obito, nor on her feet for that matter. She looked up and saw the masked jaw of Kakashi and blood running down its side. Kakashi breathed in and out, having now used so much of his speed just to save his teammate. He felt so much killing intent in a single moment that words could not describe how he had managed to overcome it and move quick enough to save Rin. He didn't even feel the pain that had come from his cheek, which had took the blow for Rin. Kakashi's head slowly turned until he could see Obito. Did you just try to hurt Rin? Did you, Obito? Obito raised the kunai that had Kakashi's blood dripping off it and activated his Sharingan. I'm no longer a shinobi of the leaf. So get out of my way, Kakashi, or die. Slowly, Kakashi let Rin down to where she stood on her own feet, and then he turned to Obito fully. Rin, stay back. He lifted his headband above his left eye and revealed his kurgan. This might get ugly. Triple X. I feel something really bad is going down. Boruto couldn't shake that feeling no matter how much he tried, and the darkened, almost drowsy sky wasn't helping in the slightest. You should come back inside. You could catch a cold. He turned behind him to see Yukaina holding a black umbrella to protect herself from the rain. He sighed lowly and turned back to the dark sky. I'm a shinobi, I'll be fine. You need to go back inside. She resigned herself and closed the door to the roof, and Boruto heard it. I'm sorry, but I cannot do that. My husband told me to take care of you while he was gone. Boruto hesitated, not really knowing how to respond. Somehow, hearing her say that felt nice. It felt really nice. The rain had gotten worse, and at this point he was drenched in his own clothing, but he never attempted to move from his spot. It wasn't that he didn't feel like it or that he was injured, it was simply because he didn't care what happened to him anymore. He had lost so much, and it had caused so much pain. He had everything at the start, and now, after all these years, he only had his friends left. No family, no relatives, no mentors, no sensei. Losing all of that had left a hole in his chest that he tried and failed to fill. All he could do now was try to forget and move on past. To keep moving forward no matter what happened. Because even through all that pain, he felt a certain hope that he could not describe with words. But he knew it could somehow lead to peace. He glanced to his side, no longer feeling the hard rain pounding against his body. It was Yukaina who was getting a bit wet, having tried to help the teen defend himself from the rain with her small umbrella. His eyes had widened and watered up when he realized something. It was something that his mother did. Despite not wanting to show any emotion, tears began running down his face uncontrollably. He forced his eyes shut to try and stop it, but it didn't help one bit. The tears kept coming, and eventually he gave up. He felt all the sadness that has built up for so long before it all paused from a single action. Though smaller than him, Yukaina had wrapped her arms around him just as his mother used to in his frozen open, shock filling his system. She sung with a soft voice and equally soft eyes. The tone was soothing and the song long. Neither of them minded it, and when she finally released him, he did his best not to show any more tears. Are you better now? She asked, trying to get a good look at his face, but he kept moving. I'm fine. He muttered quickly, but looked at her when a curious question popped into his head. Hey, who taught you how to sing like that? This time it was Yukaina who had begun looking at the dark sky, smiling but still somehow looking sad. I was taught how when I was but only 3, and I just kept getting better from there. Boruto nodded, satisfied with the answer, but many more questions had popped up in his brain that he had to ask. What about where you came from? What was that like? The sadness in her eyes only increased, but her smile never left. I was the heir to my kingdom from the snow country. The snow county, well, as you can imagine, was brutally cold and very snowy. But it was a beautiful land, I suppose. Boruto had just realized that he might have just been fighting there. She turned him and shot another smile. This time it was a lot more gentle. What about you? How is the future? The grim look that settled on his face almost caused her to frown, and Boruto tried to rein in the look that had even caught him by surprise. I apologize for bringing up such memories. It was insensitive of me. No, it's fine. Boruto said in a low voice and looked down at his hands while he spoke. The future was really colorful and fun. When I was a kid and became a ninja, I had my own challenges, but it was never too bad and never like the times my father lived in. But now it's worse. Even worse than it was in the past. Because now, even children lose their lives, some even right after they're born. A crack of thunder and a flash of lightning finished right after he stopped talking, and Yukaina only looked at him, her face now unreadable to him, but not that he was looking. She looked back at the view that had. From where they were they could see a good amount of the light-up village. I guess even someone as young as you has their own story to tell. But I suppose that's the story of our world as a whole. Boruto lifted his head and stared into the side of hers. What do you mean? A small smile broke out on her face. My husband has his own demons that he tries to hide. And they say that the eyes are a window to the soul. In all of your eyes, I can clearly see the pain that haunts them. But I want you to know that you will get through it as long as you keep moving forward no matter what happens. My husband, every time I see him, the light in his eyes gets smaller and smaller, almost to a flicker, but he keeps going forward. He's a strong man, but I believe that you can be even better than him. Boruto only stared at her, not knowing what to say or how to react. Her words had hit him hard. He had been constantly questioning himself. He has been told by so many that he was the light that would shine through the despair and move them forward in a new era, but he had never believed any of those words. So many believed in him to be better than the last generation, and now he would try to be better. To become better in not only strength than the past generation but better in mental strength as well. He needed to learn how to be on his own. Because he always had people to help him. Before he could say anything to Yukaina, a dark figure leaped onto the roof behind them and grabbed his attention. When he turned to it, he saw that it was Mitsuki. He was drenched in rain but otherwise looked normal. My clone found Sarada, but you have to come quickly. Something bad has happened. XXX. Itachi watched the boiling water that sat in a large pot over the stove, waiting for it to reach the perfect temperature. Contrary to what most would think, he would cook the most out of all the Uchiha but would be rivaled with Izumi, who also cooked a lot. Shisui wouldn't be allowed in the kitchen unless he was eating. He almost burned down the house on a number of occasions. One time even when no electricity was in use. Itachi's head was very conflicted at the moment. On one side he was thinking about Izumi and what they shared. He touched his lips at the memory. Shisui had asked him if something happened between the two, and he was able to avoid answering when he spoke about dinner. The other Uchiha had nothing but hospital food for the past couple of days, so it immediately grabbed his attention. He knew it wouldn't last long. Which had took the blow for Rin. He knew that he adored Izumi, but he didn't know if he loved her or not. He simply had no experience with the feeling to truly know what it was. Then on the other side of his mind was his brother. He hadn't seen him in a long time and he was getting increasingly worried about him. He was tempted to run after him to ensure he would get home, but he wanted to put his faith in not only his friends, but the next generation. Hey, is the food ready yet? I'm starving. Shisui asked, hobbling on a crutch into the kitchen. Itachi blinked and looked over at his injured best friend. It'll be ready shortly. Grab yourself a snack to eat in the meantime if you're truly starving, but do not ruin your appetite. Sure. Itachi went to cutting up vegetables as Shisui hobbled to the refrigerator to grab something out of it. You think they'll get Sasuke back from Orochimaru? Itachi heard him ask. I don't know. He answered solemnly after a long pause. He didn't really know how to feel, only that he wanted to keep faith in his friends. But I do have faith that he will come. Shisui nodded but didn't comment, and Itachi couldn't tell what the other Jonin was thinking at the moment. He even froze visibly at his next question. So what happened between you and Izumi? I told you I would dash. You told me you would tell me later. He cut in. Well, here's later, so what happened? He remembered how flustered Izumi was when he was just joking about it, so he knew it had to be something. His lips set a thin line and he let out a unusual sigh. We kissed. Those two words hung through the air for quite a long time, and Itachi had to turn around to see the state of utter shock his cousin was in, and he almost laughed at how comical the man looked. No way! He yelled, and Itachi covered his ears. But when? How? What? Itachi closed his eyes briefly. I know it's out of nowhere, but dash. Out of nowhere? Are you kidding me? He yelled, his one good arm flailing about. We all knew you two liked each other for years, but I never knew it would happen. Wow, so you guys are dating, right? Itachi shook his head and stared blankly into disappointed eyes. No. We are not. Shisui shook his head in disbelief, speaking slowly in disbelief. Wait, so you guys kissed but aren't dating? Now that he thought about it, they both seemed kind of distant from each other when they had that meeting at the hospital. Yes. That's exactly correct. Ugh, he facepalmed in disappointment. You're acting just like Sensei. Maybe worse, because you like her too. Itachi turned away and went back to finish cutting the vegetables he had started on earlier. We are simply friends. You might have mistaken that friendship as more than it is. No, Shursui said forcefully. I can tell. You two love each other. We do not. Itachi countered quickly. You do. Shursui insisted, dropping his snack to look directly at the younger Uchiha. I can tell. He added more softly. Both Uchiha's eyes rose to their eyebrows when a spike of unrecognizable chakra gained their attention. It was close and very strong. No way, Shursui muttered, turning to where he felt the signature coming from. No way it was from there. There's no way. Itachi removed himself from the counter after taking off his apron and threw it on the counter. Shursui, stay here. You're hurt. No, I'm Dash. This is not up for discussion. He spoke with finality, and Shursui knew how serious he was because his Sharingan had activated right after. Shursui said nothing as Itachi took careful but fast steps toward the hallway. There was no way someone actually snuck into that place. The chakra's signature faded off, but his pursuit didn't stop. He crouched down and lifted the tile in the hallway, and down the cold, dusty stairs he saw two individuals. He didn't recognize them. Slowly, they turned to him, seeing the light cover the front side of his body in a shadow. Scarily, they could only see his blazing Sharingan glaring down at them. Mitsuki was shocked to see the man in front of them, but nowhere near the shock that Sarada was in. It was like she was paralyzed by the way she froze and tensed up. You too. He said in such an authoritative voice that it bounced off the walls in echoes. Who are you, and how do you know about this place? Your next sentences should be answering those questions, or there will be a consequence. Mitsuki spared a glance at his teammate, but her mouth only laid open uselessly, shock still overriding her movements. He realized the talking would be all up to him. My name is Mitsuki, and that's Sarada. And I can't tell you why we know about this place. He added with a bit of uncertainty. Wrong answer. Mitsuki had to brace himself to try and block a kick that had made it through his defenses and slammed into his gut, sending him flying back and falling in a heap. Swiftly, Itachi turned and leaped at the girl, and her instincts kicked in, and she was able to grab his fist right before it hit her. Itachi noticed that it had been on pure instinct from the look on her face and narrowed his eyes. He used her grip against her and tugged her right toward him. Right before she reached him, another Itachi popped into existence beside them and gripped her shoulder, holding back her other arm for a counter. Sarada couldn't help her eyes widening at just how fast the other Uchiha had weaved hand signs. It was breathtakingly fast. Itachi's other fist smashed into her stomach while the clone forced her down on her knees. She felt him reach into her pouch and didn't know what he was going to do until the cold metal of a kunai touched her throat. She soon understood what situation she was in. Don't hurt her. Mitsuki yelled and was going to move until the next words hit his ears. If you move, I'll slice her throat wide open. The cold gaze of his Sharingan almost stopped him from breathing. Mitsuki. He could only stare as Itachi turned away from him and leaned down so that he could stare eye to eye with Sarada as well, so that his clone could see if the white-haired boy moved. I don't particularly like ravaging through someone's mind when the other alternative could be much simpler. Itachi stated, a clear threat hanging in the air. How do you know about this place? Tell me your purpose in coming here. For seconds the teen hadn't said a word, and Itachi was just about to demand a response, but her head shot up and she looked deep in his eyes. For a brief second, he saw the burning red of a Sharingan glaring angrily at him before he was no longer in the secret hiding place of his clan. He was in a world of inferno and ash. He was surrounded by fire and ash, and the flames began to corner in on him before his own eyes widened and his chakra flared. He dispelled the genjutsu and instantly returned to the real world. He felt something traveling through the air behind him, and his clone seemed to see it as it began to aim the kunai at the teen's throat. Itachi was able to turn behind him to see the other boy's elongated limbs heading at him and was about to prepare a jutsu until something happened in a split second. Because he was turned around, he didn't see Sarada's left eye change from the Sharingan and quickly evolve into her father's Rinnegan. And it glowed darkly. Almighty push. Everything in her vicinity was sent flying with enough force that when Itachi hit the hard stone wall behind him, it threatened to shatter with just how many cracks laid on it. His clone had desummoned from the force and Mitsuki was sent flying briefly but was able to gain control because he happened to be a bit further away from the epicenter. That should distract him enough so I can explain to him, Mitsuki thought. But he was wrong. It wasn't long before Itachi was back on his feet and looking directly at Sarada, but she wasn't looking at him anymore. Her Sharingan, glowing, stared at the entrance and Mitsuki didn't understand until Sarada used her eyes to dispel the genjutsu. His senses screamed at him to turn and just like before he could only see the blazing Sharingan eyes in the darkness as he looked down at them from the entrance. Mitsuki grew worried when he figured out what had been happening this entire time. They had been in a genjutsu since the moment they looked into his eyes and he had been watching them, observing them and now knew some of their abilities. But the true problem was that the Sharingan and the Rinnegan. He looked at Sarada with deadly eyes as the morphed into the Mangekyo Sharingan. How do you have those eyes? Their family was dead and Itachi knew that he played a hand in their annihilation as well as the marking of their graves from the list provided by the higher-ups of Konoha. They hadn't missed a single person. Either she stole those eyes, or she wasn't from the village. Mitsuki was in a pinch at the moment. He didn't know whether telling Sarada's uncle was a good thing as it could disrupt something that happened to him later. And while he could just fight the Uchiha head-on, he was sure he would win. The Uchiha was no joke and he knew the battle would be long and hard. They would alert the village and also there was Sarada. Due to her mental state he couldn't safely assume what she would do if he began fighting her and that was a major problem. Because at the moment she was the most destructive on their team. Mitsuki looked surprised and worried when Sarada's right hand sparked lightning until she formed the Chidori. Did she not know she was fighting her uncle? Did she not care? Itachi looked just as surprised. Kakashi-san's technique? How does she know it? Kakashi was the original creator of the technique. There can't be a person outside of the village that knew about it. It was impossible. She raised the arm high, sparks of lightning bouncing off the walls in a display of power. We are shinobi from Konoha. My master is Kakashi Hatake. He taught me this technique. The Chidori. Excellent. Mitsuki thought. She knows him well and knows he would likely see reason more than anything else. She used the fact she knew of Kakashi-sama's technique and knew what he was thinking to flip what he thought on its head. Now they could talk freely without being attacked. She's lying. A voice said suddenly and Mitsuki frowned at the unfamiliar voice. Captain Kakashi has no students other than his genin. We know him personally. Itachi turned behind him briefly, anger marring his features. What are you doing here? I told you to stay back, Shursui. Sorry, but when I sensed two people I had to come. You know, to even up the odds. Itachi stayed silent for several moments. Fine. We'll talk about it later. For now, I want them to explain why they are here. Triple X. Kakashi, it's pointless to fight me. Obito weighed impassively. I know that you know that. So, get out of my way. Before I seriously hurt you. The ferocity in Kakashi's eyes hadn't left and Obito knew the Hatake would not take his offer. What in the world happened to you, Obito? At this point his fist was trembling in anger. I knew you changed all the way back when we were under Minato-sensei. But, I never thought you would change so much that you would raise your hands against Rin. Oh, please Kakashi. Obito scoffed. Save the dramatics. Rin is a shinobi just as we are. Are you saying that we shouldn't treat her as equal because she is a woman? Kakashi barely kept himself from running at him. You know that's not what I meant. Kakashi said through gritted teeth. When Obito smirked at him in amusement Kakashi couldn't help his disgust. Who are you? It's like you're not even the same person anymore. What happened to you, Obito? The demand was met with another chuckle from Obito. Why so serious, Kakashi? You expected this, didn't you? You knew I was no longer my old, foolish self. You knew this day would come. Kakashi had heard enough delusion from his friend and rushed at him so fast that the ground briefly shook from the force. Obito didn't seem at all surprised and whipped his kunai at Kakashi. Kakashi only saw its glint and heard it, but it was all he needed to incline his head to dodge without losing a step. Kakashi aimed a punch but was sidestepped by Obito, who aimed a chip at his neck that would incapacitate. Kakashi saw through this and maneuvered his body midair. The chop landed on his forearm and he sent a kick, surprising Obito at the speed he could throw it even at his position. But it didn't hit him as he blocked with his own forearm. In a flash, the two separated. It was like they hadn't even moved in the first place with how fast their exchange was. Kakashi grimaced in annoyance looking at the Sharingan that Obito possessed. Obito could see his movements. If he rushed head-in like that, he needed to get around it somehow. "Do you really want to do this, Obito?" Kakashi asked. He couldn't see an Obito that wanted to actually fight them in a serious battle. Obito smirked and Kakashi so badly wanted to wipe it off his face. "No, not particularly. But I feel that you won't allow me to leave if I don't put you down. You don't have to look so torn, Kakashi. You look like a lost dog." A dangerous glint shined in his eyes. "One that needs to be put down." Kakashi surged forward, reaching in his pouch. He launched a single kunai with a smoke bomb attached to it, but Obito caught it with ease. The smoke bomb exploded, throwing smoke all around the duo. "That won't work on me," Obito yelled out, stabbing through the smoke with the kunai he had caught. It went straight through Kakashi's abdomen, but before he could react further, it turned into lightning and electrocuted him, stunning him into place. The ground beneath him broke, surprising him. Under the ground. Kakashi broke from underneath the ground and grabbed Obito by the throat with one hand and activating a lightning blade in the other. He slammed Obito hard onto the ground and it cracked underneath the force. Even the smoke had been pushed away. They stared at each other in silence for a while. Neither spoke for what felt like an eternity till Obito broke that silence. "Why didn't you do it?" Kakashi's eyes widened at the question. "Why didn't you kill me with your lightning blade, Kakashi? Is that what you want me to do?" He yelled back, the technique cackling madly in his hand. "I didn't come here to kill you. I want to understand why you would even consider hurting Rin." The dry chuckle that came from his teammate made him want to throw up. "I denounced my affiliations with the lead village. I'm no longer a shinobi of theirs. And I wanted to be taken seriously. Do you hear yourself?" Kakashi trembled in anger so violently that his voice was shaking. "Do you hear yourself?" Obito countered. "You're the great Kakashi Hatake and I'm just a rogue ninja. You have me pinned yet, despite your anger, you can't just kill me. You want to talk to me instead." "Enough." Kakashi grounded out. "That's enough. If I can't understand you through words, I'll understand you with my fist. The real you." Obito's face lit up in amusement. "Yeah. That's the spirit, Kakashi." Kakashi slashed Obito's throat with his Chidori and after a couple of seconds it faded as if it were a mirage. Kakashi whipped himself around, grabbing the kunai Obito had dropped and launched it at a tree. In an instant, Obito batted it away as if it were a baseball and stared down at Kakashi with a blank expression. Kakashi breathed in and out, trying to alleviate his anger to clear his head. The next part of their battle would depend on it. After a couple of long, deep breaths, Kakashi spoke. "I can see now that words won't help us come to a conclusion." Chakra, tons of it began welling up inside of him and his kurgan glowed so brightly that the area around him shined. "I'll give you everything I have. With this power, I will settle this." Obito acknowledged the chakra that was radiating off his friend. He had never seen Kakashi use so much before and his Uchiha blood was beginning to boil. This battle would be even fun than his battle with Urashiki. His Sharingan spun rapidly until his Mangekyo glared at Kakashi. Then come. Triple X. Naruto's eyes popped open, but he didn't see the final valley where he had fought Sasuke. All around him were featureless walls and he was ankle-deep in water, but somehow he didn't feel wet. What is this place? Where am I? You're in my domain, Kit. A deep voice startled him so hard that he had almost called back in his butt. He stared hard at the large creature he was seeing with surprise and blinked rapidly, just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. 9 tails? He questioned. Sure, he transformed into it with Gamabanta during his battle with Gaara and even heard his voice regularly, but to actually see the giant fix was completely something else entirely. He had an unbelievably scary aura. Wherever this is, let me out, Naruto demanded anxiously. I have to make sure Sasuke is dash. Sasuke is gone. You lost. The fox interrupted, silencing the blonde. Then more power, Naruto said suddenly. Give me more of your power so I can get him. I know you can lead me to him, right? Kurumada couldn't help the smirk on his face. The brat always had that look of utter determination that could even persuade an enemy that he would not give up. Unfortunately, Kuruma was neither an enemy and he was in control of the power Naruto would receive. Though still determined, the smirk on the fox's face was enough for his own withdrawal a small bit. It was kinda scary looking in a way. I could, Kit, but I'm not going to. Naruto's face deflated like a balloon. What? He shouted. But why? Kuruma snarled a bit in annoyance and it quickly shut Naruto up. He sighed to let the tension out before speaking up. Your tiny body cannot handle more than the power I have already given you. You're not ready to fight Sasuke yet. You don't know that dash. I do. He interrupted forcefully. I saw that battle you just had with him. You lost. Boo dash, he tried to protest but was once again shut down. Nothing. You lost, Kit. Get over it. Kuruma watched silently as Naruto's body shook with anger, tears threatening to come out of his eyes. Does that mean, his voice came out with a low, angry rumble, that Orochimaru has Sasuke? By the looks of it, is Naruto were anywhere else, Nine-Tails chakra would have been leaking out of him and he would have lost control. You're correct, Kit. But, he managed to get out before Naruto exploded. That can change and it depends on you. What do I have to do? Naruto asked immediately, internally hoping whatever it was going to be a quick and easy process. He was disappointed with the next words that came out of the large fox's mouth. You have to learn how to master and control my power. That the only way you will be able to beat Sasuke. Naruto looked confused and looked down at his clenched fist. But how am I supposed to do that? Every time I use your power I can barely even remember what happens. I lose myself completely. Kuruma gained his Jinchuriki's attention when he pointed at him. It's your weak body, but that will be fixed with time. Listen to me and don't question anything I tell you. He waited for a nod from Naruto before continuing. Jiraiya will take you on a 3-year training trip and try to help you tame my power. He makes good progress, but the only ones that can help you are other Jinchuriki like Gaara. I'll arrange a meeting with another Jinchuriki so that you can begin your training as fast as possible. As Naruto soaked in the information silent, Kuruma thought to himself with a small grin on his face. You're not the only one with ideas to change the future, Uchiha brat. I have my own way of making sure whatever happens is good. That means Naruto needs to surpass him as quickly as possible.